Call the meeting to order. The meeting is duly constituted, quorum is present, and the first order of business is approval of the agenda for the council strategy meeting of Tuesday, December 15th. Can I have a motion and a second? Any discussion? Adds, subtracts, removed?
I've got two ads.
Okay, we'll start with you, Ron.
With your blessing there, Ron. For new business, so it would be item G, that would be Trailblazers reimbursement. And item H, Central Beach washrooms.
Okay. Fred?
No, not for me.
Helen?
For mine, under 7F, I think it should have been village office / website and communication instead of just website communication.
Okay.
I thought that was mine, Helen, because I had the, maybe it's both of ours, because I've got, I'd need some staff guidance on some of the email stuff where it's doing funny things.
I don't know. It was mine. Maybe it was yours as well.
Can you piggyback?
Mine
Can I have
wasn't
it?
talking about
Do you want me to
email.
piggyback, or do you want me to raise it to line? Carl, what would you like? This is about
Let's do a separate one so that
I think
it's
it's-
separately recorded.
HI.
Yeah.
Let's call it
Email fixes?
email fixes. Thank you.
Okay. I've got one or two things, but they'll come up in Public Works report. So let's proceed. All in favour of the agenda as modified? Opposed? That carries. Public participation. Moving on to adoption of the minutes of November 17th. I think we must get you some whiskey. I hear that's good for
It'd be like the old school drinking at council meetings. It's like the bank in the 80s.
It's medicinal.
It was a fun period.
yeah.
Mind you, we used to have guns in the drawer then too.
I only have one, and that is it's more a request. Shauna, where we do the action items carried over, can we it's correctly, as you say, that for council's review, these are the action items carried over from all previous minutes. Can we add the words including the most recent meeting? Mm-hmm. Just to be absolutely sure that, so that everybody knows, they don't have to go back and look at the.
So that's under on page 5.
Page 5, yeah. It's
Just,
just
the
just to
actual-
change the template.
Yeah, the actual. So all previous meetings, including the most recent meeting or the current meeting? The most.
Well, it wouldn't be the current meeting
of
because
course,
we would
the
know
most
the-
recent, right?
the most recent.
Recent meeting. Okay.
That's all I had. And so I wouldn't suggest we need to change it here unless you want to, but because it'll do a reissue, but in future ones.
Yes.
Good. Okay, thanks. So approve the minutes. Motion, please. Second. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And business arising from the minutes, we'll return to the action items. Pam, can you shed any light on either of those?
The first one, as I think we had discussed last meeting, that's coming in the new year.
Okay, good.
And
So, Shauna, can you actually say in the carryover for the current meeting's minutes for item 1 to be actioned in the new year, just so we know?
And then to research the Board of Variance members, this I think was with Anne, so I guess it would go to the new CAO.
Well, it was October 6th due, so it's now 2 months. I mean, yeah, okay, if it's not done, it's not done, I suppose.
Yeah, I haven't been involved with it, so was that your understanding that Anne was working on this?
Going to
Yeah.
do it
I think she was, but
Would you ask for this for the January 19th meeting?
that may be a bit soon. It may be unnecessary pressure. I mean, what we're going to do with it is only consider, it's a specialized committee of council. So I would say we carry it over for the CEO's handling, something like that, at their discretion.
So it'd be struck?
No, I wouldn't strike it. No, because we did ask for it, and there's a reason for it. I need to have these things seem to need resolutions to get action. So Okay, so that's it for carried over items. Unfinished business, there's none. New business, 7A, emergency disaster. That's a presentation, right, Fred?
Yeah.
Okay, so
If they're ready, if not, then we'll keep rolling.
yeah, I think they were talking about doing it until working there until 1:30.
I estimated that it would maybe up at 3:30, so they probably geared for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, if you agree, let's just change the order here. We'll move to, let's say the budget and the water parcel tax report and the budget considerations report are going to take a long time. So let's do that after the emergency disaster alerting system report. Let's go to E for now. Santa's breakfast reimbursement request, page 29.
So I will show you this smiley face before I hand this over to Carl, since I have an interest in this.
Okay, thanks. So I'll take this one. You've read the recommendation and the background. It's a somewhat special case in that had the Santa's breakfast people been more on the ball, they would have booked the hall in time and not had to pay equipment rental. However, they didn't, and so they did have to, because the equipment had to be moved to the school. Some of this is out-of-pocket cost for the village. We actually have paid it in terms of labour. I see in the fees bylaw that we're going to be looking at later this evening that the table rental, you can essentially buy a table for the rent close to. But these are the fees that were charged to them. Clearly, we don't want to set a precedent for everybody with an excuse to get tables for nothing. Sorry. I'll just do this. I thought I turned that off. I have now. Sorry, guys. So what do we think?
I don't have a problem reversing it. I mean, I see it as an exceptional situation.
What is the exception?
Normally they would have had it at our hall, but it had already been booked, and so we bumped them essentially up to their other place, to the school.
I think further to that, to add some background information, had they know that it would have been bumped, and had it been early enough, they would have applied under a community grant to got this up in as part of our budget process, which I would assure when I go through all of the applicants for the community grants this year, I would be asking everybody the hard questions and all the stuff in so that contingencies like this are in.
Pam, you were going to say?
Yeah, just to clarify what the process would have been is they would have applied for a municipal grant, and because we actually don't waive fees, what happens is as part of the municipal grant process they identify when they need the equipment. So even if they had been able to book the hall, they still would have had to put down a damage deposit, and they still would have had to rent the tables, and then we would have waived the fees. So normally what happens, like with for example the caroling is a good example, that's a one-time event, and they get a municipal grant for just a few $100s, and then they come in and fill out the paperwork, they put in their municipal grant, they require it for the Sunday, they require it, they do the paperwork, we still have to look at insurance implications, and then we don't really waive the fees, but we still actually book them. So when you see the municipal grant application, they need $500, but they also need $500 of in-kind services, and then we actually do an entry to charge it to municipal grants, and then credit the public works time, just so it's a proper reflection of what it actually costs. So this line here, if the event was held in the community center, there would have been no charges for this. That's actually, the intent is accurate, but that's not actually how we would do it. So I think on a go-forward basis, I've actually made a note to contact, if I can get the contact person, to see if they are interested in a municipal grant next year.
But they
And
have
like
to
I say, they
plan
have to-
a year ahead. They have to plan
Pretty much.
a
but-
grant a year ahead.
But it's an annual event. Theirs is actually probably easier because they know exactly
Yeah.
the day they want to have it, just like the caroling. Sometimes with the events committee, it's a little more challenging picking the days because sometimes, depending on the event. But that is actually the process. So we actually don't waive fees. We recognize the cost and then we waive the fees, and it becomes an expense of the municipal grant. Although we don't physically give them the cash, we still record it as an expense of the municipal grant. So we accurately know what the costs are.
Would the play school be eligible for municipal grant?
They would for the the
For a
Santa's
specific,
breakfast.
for a specific event,
Yeah.
they would.
Yeah.
Theoretically, they could have applied for, had they been far enough ahead, but it seems that year-over-year transitioning is not wonderful sometimes. Theoretically, they could have, if they knew what the costs were, and there was a rental cost for the school, they could have applied for that. They could have applied for the table. Theoretically, they could have applied for the food too, and things like that. I mean, it would be ultimately Council and May and what they wanted to do and the benefit to the community, but with north of what I understand 220 adults at the function, it's clearly a community event.
I believe in the past they have received municipal grants. I think it's just the turnover of staff and it got missed.
It's not staff, it's all
Turnover of
volunteers.
the volunteers.
Yeah, it's residents.
Sorry, but I just meant who's ever doing that function.
On this last piece of information for me, the school was such a successful venue, I suspect with the larger size, that's where it'll continue.
Yeah, it was, yeah. Yeah, just to interject. What's the status of community grant applications so far, given that we have 15 days left?
They're due December 31st and I've only received one, which is surprising because
Have we sent
it's
out
been,
reminders?
I sent out, I'm planning to send another reminder this week, which we didn't have to last year. Interesting enough, I was here at this time last year on a contract basis and we had received them all, so it was interesting. It's been in the e-post every week for weeks now. And I did send a personal email to each of the people who had a repetitive grant. We had some one-time grants last year, and I didn't send an email to them, but I sent a personal email reminding them. And we've got one in for the Historical Society. So I'm actually going to send a personal reminder as well. It's continuing in the e-post until the end of the year. But I'm going to send a personal email again reminding them. And I could, if Council thinks it's a good idea, maybe send one to the Santa's Breakfast group, just saying, you know, you do have the option of applying for a municipal grant next year. I mean, no guarantee that it would be approved, but at least to get in at a
I'm wondering if we can have something on the form that lets people check this is a standing request, like Santa's Breakfast. They do that every year.
They do, but I think we need the application. It's not that onerous, and it forces them, because I'm very interested to know how they actually spent the money, as I think Councillor McLaughlin as well. That's a key part of the
Well,
application.
there'd still be a report every
How
year.
did you spend it? And I think we should require an application each year.
Well, I mean,
You mean for budgeting purpose?
yeah.
It basically becomes an omnibus application, it's just there in perpetuity unless the wheels fall off.
Well, precisely, because it seems that one of the big issues is the transition from one managing group to the next. And they don't read the memo, or there is no handover memo, and so they don't get to it in time.
Well, that seems like where the breakdown in the communication is the handoff in the groups, rather than, we've had a problem with staff turning over, but now it looks like we've got stable staff, so that's not gonna be a problem, but it's gonna be the groups that will be the problem with communication.
Well, I don't think this is a staff issue. I think these groups, exactly as Carl said, the volunteers turn over. And what's happening on December the 8th is not top of mind on April the 3rd. And somebody who's hosting a different function, it was top of mind for them.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I'm trying to make it easy for them, not
I
to
think-
trap them into forgetting to do the grant application. So that's something we can talk about in the fullness of time. What are we going to do about this one? Or I suggest what we might do is refund everything but the $100 they would have paid for the hall, had there been more on the ball. I mean, just as a... I'm very concerned about setting a precedent. Because, you know, it's a fine line between should they have remembered and they didn't remember and they didn't know, and so they had to do something else. And then they rented the, you know, just like anybody. I see we have another request to waive fees for renting tables. You know, how official do you need to be? I agree that there were a lot of community people there, but what's the threshold? You know, the fee schedule specifically says if you take village equipment out of the hall, you pay for it. So,
Well, you pay for it even if it's in the hall. I mean, if you still want to rent the tables for
Really?
a hall. Or sorry, it might be, I apologize, it's part of the hall rental fee.
that's what I'm saying.
So
That's
it's
why let's
incorporated, yeah.
dock them the hall rental, because then they would have got the tables come along for the ride. Of course, they had to pay a hall rental at the school, or was that given to them?
Maybe moving forward though, we can review the rental of the table if it's an open community event. Maybe we don't charge so we don't keep on coming, you know,
Maybe if it's an open event, a public
Yeah.
event.
like anyone, yeah.
Well, the part I'm kind of struggling with is why is there a damage deposit in here for them to be reimbursed by us? If they put a damage deposit in for the school should be giving their $140 and their $80.
Yeah.
I believe it was a damage deposit for the tables.
Oh,
In
for the
case, yeah, or if they
tables.
didn't.
But we'd be
it's a-
reimbursing that part anyhow,
Yes,
wouldn't we?
yes, no,
Presumably
exactly.
came back.
In fact, I believe we already have, because
Okay.
they were returned, yeah.
Oh, so that would be taken out of the 500 that you're asking
Yeah.
for?
So it's less than 500. Yay.
Okay, what's what?
I'm bounced.
I'll say yes.
Well, what Carl's asking is whether this goes to resolution for
Oh.
refund tonight.
Yes.
Okay, what's your sense, Fred?
I'm okay to give them back the, everything but the damage deposit they've already
360.
gotten.
Yeah, it's not a money-making event. Okay, well, can we bring it to council meeting then, and we'll have to resolve to refund the lot or less $100 that they should have paid for the hall.
Less the 2 deposits.
Well, the 2 deposits, that's, yeah, I mean, that I'll take for granted. Okay,
So sorry, just for clarity on my part, you do want them to pay though what they would have had to pay to rent the hall? Or just
well,
refund
because
it all this year?
it's not our fault that they had to pay to rent the school. It's minuscule numbers, it's the precedent.
No, I understand, it was just for clarity, it was totally for clarity,
Yeah,
I
I
wasn't
don't
sure
know.
what had been agreed to.
Well, isn't the policy for the municipal hall, if you open it to the public, there's no hall rental? That there is if it's a private meeting?
No, there's a hall rental, but as part of your municipal grant process, if you apply for a municipal grant, you say the cash that you want, and you also identify the times you want the hall, so we reserve it, and it's an in-kind contribution. So we take the value of it, so we don't essentially waive the fee, they don't have to pay it, but we actually book it as though
Right.
we did receive the revenue. Sort of as an in-kind contribution. It's a distinction, but.
But then, in this case, though, there would be actual, the $100 coming.
Well, that's for a private event. I'm looking at, just because we happen to have fees and schedules in our package for later discussion. There's a private event fee that used to be 100 that's going up, that's proposed to go up now. But I don't see, there's a program use thing, which is 20% of the private use rate.
Is there a public?
It doesn't say anything about public. Non-profit group, that's
Yeah, that's
$40
it.
a month.
That's the municipal grants, if you're, as part of the municipal grant process.
Yeah, this is not a regular thing, it's a one-time thing. So presumably their fee would have been $20, 20% of 100. Gymnasium rental for program use. Programs
That's for
contact.
programs, like the yoga program, and don't have it in,
Programs contracted through the village? Is the yoga contracted by the village?
yeah, those are programs, there's different ways of doing it, they can pay for it, or we get a % of their revenue. And that's what they pay for the hall.
Okay, well, I mean, I don't know the details. Well, we should contract the pancake breakfast people. Then they'd get it for $20.
The same people, actually.
Yeah. Okay, let's bring it forward. Got it? Thanks. Okay, so we'll move
So
on.
when we bring it forward, can we change the numbers? Because it's no longer
Yeah.
500, correct?
Yeah.
No, we changed it in discussion.
Different number.
Yeah.
You betcha. What's their timing there, Fred? The siren people.
I told up to,
They're ready?
Yeah, she just booked her.
Okay, well, let's go with them then, so they don't have to sit around. So now we will, for the purposes of your minutes, go to 7A.
do we bring them?
Yeah.
To the other side of the tracks.
Yeah, well, in fact, these guys are going to want to sit as well, right?
Probably, yeah.
Let me, no, you're fine.
Not, it's gonna be here. Not sure.
Yeah, Jim may be here soon, so, in fact, I'll just grab two messages.
Shauna, can I see my report? 'Cause I haven't even checked it.
So we can take them.
I'm sure you guys are going to want to sit, so you can sit here. Although you may want to, do you want to drive?
Yeah, please.
So there's the
Yeah.
projector there. Maybe you sit in this middle chair.
Yeah.
In which case, I'll sit here.
While we're waiting, just to introduce Sam is from Microwatt and Rob is from Federal Signal. Where one is the local supplier and one's the manufacturer's rep. So we should, this is Rob, by the way.
Yes.
Hi. Sorry.
Voila. Nice and cozy in here.
I know.
As it should be.
As it should. Put an air action going.
Should be glad it's in the summer meeting.
Oh. Really?
One item missing in your consolidated budget: thermostat.
Supposed to get moved.
He's the office one, he's the only one who controls this.
Thank you very much. I'll give one here. Thank you. Micro one. We want mega one.
You got mega one? Oh yeah, you got one there. Here you go.
How can micro one?
You know, good things come in small packages.
More precise.
And I got some of the glossies here, so everyone wants them. And all it is just kind of us, and it talks a bit about the different types of warning systems. So if you need a cure for insomnia, there's some good reads there. So
We've got it right here.
A particularly thick one. Thank you very much.
here you go.
Yep.
Thank you.
Another guy will naturally be sitting there.
Okay, I will stand.
Oh no, you can
Oh, he's
sit
not here yet, so.
Okay. It's like,
Then I will stand anyway.
you can probably sit here for the moment. Are we okay with the lights? The lights out?
Us. I've seen the presentation, so I'm good.
You do with your eyes closed?
Yeah.
Oh, no,
Well,
the
that's-
slide that I
that's
just
a
added?
little too quick. Yeah, that's good.
They say in professional communications classes you're not supposed to switch the lights on.
Okay. Oh, cricket, I guess that's good now. So, yeah, just want to thank Councillor Bain for giving us the opportunity. We met a couple weeks ago, I guess a few weeks ago now, at the BC Emergency Preparedness. We were discussing a bit about outdoor warning systems and alarms and that, and you guys were quite interested. If you just want to hit the next slide. Doo-doo-doo. Comes. Here, you can borrow this if you need it to help you out.
The ring? I want a
Secret
hammer.
decoder ring, it's not just everything.
There we go.
Talking with Councillor, the purpose of today is just more to give you an overview of warning systems, to give you a better idea because you guys are thinking about that, and kind of in general with the big one coming. Just a little bit about me. I've been in the military for 22 years now, and well, I was the OC for the signal squadron here, and that's all we do is practicing for domestic operations when it comes and setting up that VHF bubble. But there's some stuff that you can preempt. So really what we want to do is who we are, talk a bit about warning systems in general, and talk a bit about Lions Bay because we were given some locations where if we were to put something, we can give you an idea of our thoughts on that. Any questions before we go? Or,
Sounds good.
Sounds good? Okay. Next. I'll go over really quick. So Microwatt, we've been around for 30 years. I am the new guy well, actually, no, we just hired 2 more. So I'm not the new guy anymore, but I am the new guy in BC. We are an Alberta company, and our background is safety. And we know safety systems. It started out in industrial flame and gas detection, and with a lot of those large plants, you need some of these mass enunciation systems. So what I'm doing is poking the bear and see what kind of trouble we can get into, but The thing that you have with us is we have engineers that actually know what they're talking about. We have access to good suppliers, which we have Rob to help us out on that. And then you do have that support, and we're pretty good for supporting our customers. Next one, this is just the product line. In this case, the big thing is the federal signal side of the house. So,
Do you handle the features there, SCADA specifically as well?
Yeah,
Okay.
we do have SCADA. That would be industrial controls. They are out of California, and I don't know San Diego, but their claim to fame is wastewater treatment facilities. They have a lot of their stuff in wastewater treatment facilities. We're trying to bring them up here and getting their name out. So there's some advantages to them as well. But Ray Systems, Honeywell, Emerson, this is all gas detection. So if you, I'll give you the 2 seconds. If you have the industrial stuff, really doesn't apply, but where some of that stuff would apply to Ray Systems, if you have a fire department that has a hazmat team and you need to go into a situation where you don't know what that chemical is, they have some products for the fire department, the hazmat teams, to kind of go in and know what the levels are before it gets too dangerous. Sonam is class 1, div 1 phones, mobility phones, and Senseer is actually hearing protection. Real expensive stupid hearing protection that I think if you're on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier, those are the guys that you need for them. But what's kind of neat is they actually have integrated radios, so for like helicopter pilots and that, call that stuff in there. Some of the neat stuff, but that's us in a nutshell. So I want to go to the next one. This is just that we actually have some letters behind our name. We just got a PEG BC just about a month ago now, so we can actually stamp documents in BC. And where that comes with our engineering services, we can actually stamp industrial flame and gas detection systems. So we can look at it and say, yeah, this makes sense, here you go. Core certification, which is a safety standard, and then we have PNGs, IS-84, so a lot of credentials behind us. We've been around for 30 years, and there's a reason why. Next, so not knowing where to start, I thought if you go to the next slide here, I thought if we can pick a case study just to give you an overview of how, Washington State, which is close to us, how they went through a process on determining and some of the things, their thought process of a warning system. And I don't know if you guys have done that, but this kind of gives you the high level view. And then once we go through this is where Rob will take over and kind of go into some of the nitty gritty of the bells and whistles. So with Washington State, next, what did they have? Worried about tsunami, worried about earthquake, volcano. That was Mount St. Helens. I was a young guy when Mount St. Helens erupted. But flooding, dams, hazmat issues. So they had all these things they had to concern themselves with, and how did they want to warn their people. So something like BC, where we have tsunami, earthquake, I don't know about volcanoes, but we do have the shipping lanes, and with LNG, what do we want to do? One thing that was kind of interesting to me, like I've been with this company for 7 months now, and City of Vancouver, they had the little spill in the bay there. How did they let people know? Like there's on the radio and your social media, like, that's great, but they actually had guys and city employees kind of going up and down the beaches. I don't think that's really effective, especially if your tsunami warning's coming, right? Some people have got their iPhones and their electronic media, but how do you say, get the heck out of Dodge? The old-fashioned air raid siren. When that went off, people knew, hide and get in shelter, get below ground. They knew exactly what it was. So these were the things that they needed to consider. So then, if you want to go to the next one. So obviously, here's the requirements. A system that could be activated locally, as well as from a central control station, while accommodating basically the terrain. So that's their high level. So what do they do? If you want to go to the next one. They said these are the things that we need to have at a minimum. Now here you don't need 60 systems, but you talk about flexibility and capability. So they wanted a system that could handle the 60 sirens that had, and these are discussions that I don't know if you have, but these are some of the good discussions that you probably need to have, is how, if you do have a system and you do want to warn your people, is it by a tone or is it actual voice? And there's advantages and disadvantages to both. If you're doing the tone, you know, do you want a tone per warning? Do you need all those warnings? If you have more than one tone, then you'll have an issue of talking to your citizens of, you know, tone A means this, tone B means that, then do you go to voice? But those are those deep discussions that you obviously need to have. Then the second one, in this case, they wanted from the Emergency Operations Center, individual town sirens can be activated by the local emergency management team. So who turns on what when? So you have your procedures in that, but then do you have that capability? In a smaller location, whether it's one or two, is it the mayor that turns it on?
Yes!
I've got the power.
He's got the red button.
Yeah, and how do you do it, right? Do you have the button at the desk? Is it at the fire hall?
In my pocket.
In your pocket. And actually you can, because there's the capability. Yeah, there's a capital. Yeah, you have that. Yeah, there's an app for that. No. Yeah, you could, if you really wanted to, do you dial in, you have your passcode, and you can turn it on. They have those capabilities. And that's why they had the UFH radio. They wanted, because Washington State already had a tsunami and a Lahar system, I actually had to look that up. That's when the volcano and all that mud stuff, that's what the Lahar system was, so I learned something this time. But anyway, is there anything out here? BC tsunami warning system isn't quite there yet, so you know, there's future upgrade capability if necessary. And then they had design and construction of a satellite control system. All this is backup to the backup to the backup. So, and then user training. So when you're designing or coming for determining what you want, you need to know what your key features are and have your procedures, so that the technology, quite frankly, is relatively simplistic, and it can be accommodated to anything, and it can be everything to everybody, but it's all that, you know, the 7 Ps, piss poor planning and preparation makes for piss poor performance. So if you have all that planning and you know exactly what you want, you can tailor the system to meet that. So if you go to the next slide, okay, this is a little bit of a pitchy, and I'll keep it less. At the end of the day, dealing with something like a federal signal and a microwatt, you have the engineering, you have that experience. You know, we can work with our clients to build the best system for you. And like I said, with my background, yeah, the 20 years in the military, I've seen emergency operations center. Actually, and then the 7 years that I was in the oil and gas, I did a lot of emergency planning for blowouts and releases. So we have a bit of that experience, so we can help you out on that side. I think the next slide is now over to Rob.
Okay, just to give you a rough overview of what Federal Signal does. We started in 1901, and we were doing storefront signage that were lit up by incandescent lamps. So we still have a lamp line, a little bit more sophisticated than 1901, and we've expanded. So I think that's 2013 numbers, 800 million in sales. We're almost at $1 billion. We're a global company. We have over 3,000 employees, and everything's manufactured for North America, and South America is out of Chicago, Illinois. So what Sam was talking about, we can do several different things. The siren on the right, it's what's called our modular system. It's our most up-to-date system, and it's completely digital. So you can have both sounds, up to 256 different sounds, or you could have voice, spoken word. It could be in a different language, and it could be 256 different pre-recorded messages, or you can actually speak dial it up as sophisticated as it can be on your cell phone and talk over the siren over your cell phone. The one on the left, which is the one that we were thinking of proposing, or at least suggesting at this point, it's our loudest siren, and it'd be the most economical. It spins around in 360 degrees. There's no voice because it's electrical mechanical. And it's 130 dB at 100 feet. So this goes about 2 kilometers in diameter from its central point. So we've done just a simple graphic over top of if you were actually to place the siren here, and just the area coverage that it would give just for one siren. Now we can tone that down and give you some different options, but that's just our loudest one, and it's just one siren on one pole. Now that one on the left, that's our 2001 series. There's only 3 tones that it comes with. It comes with a steady, it comes with a slow wail, or it comes with a fast wail. And that's about 1940s technology. It just sounds like an air raid siren. You can go onto YouTube and just dial in Federal Signal 2001, and you'll see a whole laundry list of people like uploading YouTube videos of our sirens, apparently. It's scary. So the siren, when you look at it on the page, doesn't really look that big, but it's a big siren. Just to give you perspective. So we request no minimum than 30 feet high. Class 2 pole can be a telephone pole, and it just could be wood, depending, or whatever your specification requires. We don't do the installation of the pole on site. What we do is we pre-test the siren with the equipment below that powers it and controls it in our factory before it leaves. And then along with the system, 2 things can happen, depending. You have the individual or the individuals that are responsible for igniting the siren to come down to Chicago, or we have 2 individuals, one in Ontario that will come across and commission the system and train whoever's here on site. Or we'll bring somebody up from Chicago and do the same thing.
And that's where the partnership works, where we can handle that for you guys, or it's kind of totally up to you. Very flexible.
So here's a few different options. Again, the one on the right is the one we thought was best suited. The one in the middle, it's a directional series. A lot of rail yards use it. Depending on if it's, you don't necessarily need to let the rail yard know, but you might want to let the community know that there's a derailment, like right there. So they'll point that just toward the community. Okay. Just so it's directional.
And just to add to that, like Fred gave us 3 locations. If this is something that the township wants, we can go into more detailed study, and does it make sense to put these directionals on those 3 different locations, and you kind of narrow this out. But those are the possibilities and the flexibilities of having these guys with a large array of arrays.
So that middle one, the directional one, that's also digital, so you can get voice out of that as well. So that would be if it was good, better, and then the dome, like the donut one, that would be the best solution. The one on the far left, it's about 115 dB. It's 360 degrees, but it's very limited to what it can do. That's like 1920s, 1930s technology, and we're still selling it. So we can get into some interesting things if you're looking to expand into different areas, or depending on what you want to do, and that's basically going to be the ultimate question: is what do you want? Like, what you're going to expect out of what we show you here. We can go completely radio frequency, like we did in Tofino. There's 2 of those dome tower sirens for tsunami, and there's no wires connecting the 2. It's through RF, and it can be activated by somebody's cell phone. If there is emergency broadcast system sends up a signal, it will communicate to those sirens and then light them up. And then there's pre-recorded messages on there because it's such a transit community. You know, the siren might come on and what is it? You know, is it just a test? We don't know. So identification is the other question that we'd have for it. It can be something as simple as a telephone. So TELUS can run phone number line to our siren, and then that gives you the capability of calling the number from your cell phone, dialing in a code, giving it the particular, in this case, a steady wail, fast wail, or slow wail. Or you can do a test from your phone, like it's a low growl with that one. It's just kind of, just so you know that everything's good. And then with some of the controllers, you can have a controller located inside the fire hall or inside here if you wanted it to, and it communicates by RF. So through the microphone, you can actually speak, if it was at that level, a digital horn, then you could speak to it over that way as well as your cell phone. So there's different things that we can do. To the point where we can, if you, on your website, allow somebody to sign up for text notification should something happen and they're in bed and they don't hear the siren, they'll get a text message to them.
And that's actually, you brought up a good point there, is a lot of people think, or a good majority, you have this outdoor warning system. It's meant for when you're outside. The houses are meant to be soundproof. If you're in your man cave in the basement watching Star Wars comes out in a couple days, you're not going to be hearing that siren. So that's the one thing. This is for kind of the outdoor. So just have a think about that.
So that's in the cloud. There's servers, mostly in the U.S. Server farms where they're protected. They're like interior, but they're away from disaster areas, so it's pretty secure. Well, nothing's 100%, but that's the medias that we can work back and forth with. So if something comes out in Twitter right away, because that seems to be the quickest way these days, it would reach up the smart message, send out the text message. There's different ways that we can communicate. So for instance, what's really interesting is a cell phone can call somebody with a radio. So we can communicate to EMS, fire, police, ambulance, and they can crosstalk as well.
Have you found success getting onto people who've got Yukon radios in Vancouver?
Yeah, not in Vancouver, in Fort McMurray in the oil sands. So the plant that's up there is Suncor Fort Hills. And those dome towers, there's about 13 of those. And then we have lights and sirens depending on where the area is. And then there's lots of personnel that have their own radios. So that system communicates to all those radios. So they can actually speak over the sirens if they wanted to, like I smell gas, or man down, we're in this quadrant. Or there's a fire, the wind's blowing west, go to the eastern muster station. That's exactly what we're doing. And then to give you another idea, Kansas, the state of Kansas has 500 of those dome towers, and eliminating all ports of failure for tornado. They have the system set up where it interacts with the weather network, and where the tornado seems to be going, it can actually drop off that siren where the tornado is getting close and light up the next one as it's going through. So we can get pretty sophisticated, and of course that's where it gets quite expensive. So we thought, depending on what you're going to be doing, this is the coverage of what that siren would do. So we just put a pin on top of the address, and that's what it would cover if the siren was located here. So 130 dB is 10 dB more in you're standing beside a 747, and then 70 dB is like a coffee shop. So that's
And that's where the tone with voice. The one thing, if you guys are looking at having the voice capability, there's a thing called intelligibility, making sure that those speaker systems have the standard for intelligibility. I don't remember the standard offhand, but I think all your federal signal stuff has the intelligibility standard, because you don't want the Charlie Brown message going over. If you're looking, you want to have that clarity and the intelligibility so that at that 70 dB mark it is clear and people
Yeah.
can understand what that message is.
What this is giving right now is this tone. Voice doesn't carry as far, even though it would be on its loudest with our modular series. It would be 128 dB at 128 dB at 100 feet, and then it would drop off a lot sooner. A tone starts dropping off at about 800 feet from sight, and voice, I think it's around 300-400 feet. It doesn't go that far, just because of the frequency pitch.
That's the importance of understanding what you want to do, how you want to do it, and then bringing in someone who can actually say, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense.
Now, with that picture, we can actually give a more specific dB drop over a particular area. It's called sure warning. It takes about 2 weeks. We can do that, so at least you can see, as it delineates throughout distance, you'll be able to see where it drops off and where, if there's a concern, you can remove the sound, depending on your level, or maybe you need 2 sounds.
It's like contour lines on your map, but you have your dB lines, so yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And that's,
And then what I didn't mention is this can actually go into inside buildings. If it was RF, if it was, you wanted to have RF communication, we can communicate to a light. Say like if it's in a care home.
All with interface hardware,
Yeah,
of course.
yes, yeah. So it would send an RF signal to that light, and then the light would go inside the building.
well, that's one thing you want to get really funky. You talk about you can't hear inside because one of the members of the township, you want to buy, rent, whatever, they can have that alarm now inside their house and it's connected to that. So, just like I said, options and capabilities. And Federal Signal has a lot of options and a lot of capabilities. The hard work is, what do you want it to do?
Well,
Yeah.
who tells us that? Because we haven't really spec too many siren systems in Lions Bay.
Right. Okay, so then that would be the next question is what's the area, like ideal area that you're looking for to cover?
Well, I guess first of all, give us a sense of budget numbers. Okay, those 3 options that you gave there.
Yep. Yeah, it can be
Ballpark.
10, 30, 50.
10 for the dumb technology.
Yep. Roughly. Like
And 50 is per unit,
Yes.
and that's a voice and the 30 is the directional one,
Yes.
which we presumably need multiple units of.
Yes, but we just did it on that one siren, so we can do another one with the directional, and depending on, it would be more than one.
Yeah, and I take your point about intelligibility. The voice drops off. Yeah, I mean even places where they know that they're going to be announcing to the public all the time, like airports. It's
It's peanuts, yeah.
for heaven's sake.
Yeah, well, the airports don't want to spend the money to get the intelligibility because they want to keep all the money there. It's life.
They want you to miss all the planes.
Yeah.
I wonder about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, so we have 2 issues. One is a budget one. Just to give you a sense of how a small village funds itself. The 1% tax raise in Lions Bay raises $11,000. So a $30,000 siren is a 3% tax increase. Just to give you a sense of reality.
What's the population?
1,400.
Wow. Okay, so
So
that's...
any big spending is grant dependent. There is grant money, especially if we can make a case for it. To do with public safety is usually a very good driver, obviously. There's a lot of money in provincial emergency program, etc., etc. So we obviously need to be very cognizant of the budget, but the first order of business is, and we're not going to do it now, is to understand what it is that we're trying to do.
Sure,
And so, the hazards that you mentioned there are all pertinent here, except for the volcano. Although 1 or 2 of these peaks here are not dead, they're dormant, which I think there's a slight
There's a difference, yeah.
Yeah, they haven't gone recently. But they were all smoking 10,000 years ago, so it's only recently they've shut down.
Sure.
Landslide is a big issue. This whole discussion came up when we were analysing the possibility that we were going to run out of water this past summer. And we felt the need to communicate to people, to ask them to please cease all use immediately so that we could keep our network charged for fire reserve purposes. Because at a certain point, the thing runs out, you reach all kinds of problems. As soon as you run your water network out, groundwater starts infiltrating in. It's not watertight. And then you're talking about a 5-day regime to rehyperchlorinate, etc. So that was the original goal. We thought we needed a way to tell people to stop using water like we need.
Okay.
We also have the issue of interface fires because we're living on the edge of the woods. And we have too many cul-de-sacs in the village, so early morning to get people out to the airfield if we have to is a big concern.
I was kind of thinking about it over the last few weeks, and from order priority and life safety. How fast does that message need to go before that actual harm comes to the individual? So let's take a look at a tsunami for one thing, because we always talk about that. You have a bit of time, but you need to get that message out relatively quick.
Yeah, we have actually done a tsunami hazard study here some time ago, and because of the nature of the topography, they tell us that we're less susceptible because we're protected by the islands. But so tsunamis. So to answer your question, I would suggest that the timeline for warning is on the order of half an hour.
Right.
Whether somebody stops using water now or in half an hour's time, not going to make much difference. Tsunami, who knows? I mean, sometimes the thing's here before you know it. Wildfire, no more than half an hour.
Starts at the bottom and go quickly in the sun.
So then it goes to, these are the 3 or 4 different things that we want to warn our citizens. And is it a tone? So tone A means this, tone B means that, tone C means that, and then there is the handout that goes to every citizen to say if you hear this tone versus that tone, they know what to do. But we all know about educating the masses. Yeah, whatever. Then
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, I think the message will be more complex than can be communicated by tone. So we are in for a voice type device, and so I think we can do the math pretty easily in terms of just telling us how far they reach and the actual nature of Lions Bay. It's quite long, quite narrow. We certainly need more than one, maybe more like 4. So we can do that math pretty easily. So we're looking at a fairly sizable project for a community the size of Lions Bay.
And that's not including the control system.
Yes, it is. Like for that one unit on its own, yes, yeah. But not if you mean by control where it goes to the cloud and all that. No, that's more.
Yeah, so I mean, round numbers, we're talking about a quarter $250,000 project, which sounds about right for what it is. Now, Lions Bay is a very small community, so we have to rely on external funding from other levels of government. Okay.
This gives you an order of magnitude and the capabilities out there as well.
We deal with a company that does vibration sensing. So they're dealing with CN Rail and penitentiaries for ground vibration. So CN Rail is landslide. So it'll actually give a notification back to CN Rail corporate, and then they'll send it to the train. They'll know that there's a landslide and slow down and that kind of thing. And then for penitentiary, there's people walking up to the fence and throwing drugs over the fence. They want to be able to sense that. So one of the things that we're doing is we're having a siren with a light, and then they have their cameras, and then if it gets up to that point, there are sensors that are buried in the ground that you can't see. We'll pick up the different pattern of vibration just by the person walking, and then on goes the siren, on goes the light, and then the camera will flip around. So we can have that landslide capability as well, and then we communicate back to the
Automated, yeah. It's starting to get sophisticated. But,
yeah, but I'm just There's lots of options, but anyways, just throwing it out there. Okay. Good, thanks. So next steps, I can come up with a scenario using this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the scenarios that we would seek to want to warn the public on are the things that we need to think through. That's Fred's bailiwick. Some of them are sort of infrastructural, landslide, reach out, that kind of stuff. Some of them are more informational. Freeze warning, cover your tomato plants. Some of them
Yeah.
we would not want to do.
I
Just
think
because we've got a new siren doesn't mean we need to use it all the time.
Happy birthday, Frank.
the mayor's coming, get back to work. No. Yeah, but I think by you saying that, that's pretty much narrowed it down to a voice system, and whether you want to do this or have a few messages stored, that's semantics now. I think that really drives the cost per se, right? You now say by stating that we want to be able to enunciate via verbal rather than Morse code. That's narrowed it down to that.
I think so, yeah. Good, okay, thank you very much, guys.
Okay, great, thanks for your time.
Thanks for coming out all the way to the hinterland.
Hey, no, this is great.
Watch out for the tsunami on the way.
What?
Yeah.
Do big cities use these siren systems?
Yes. Like all over the Hawaiian Islands?
No, but like here, like local?
Not
as many as
local.
there should be.
Well, I've seen your stuff at Tofino.
Yeah.
It's all up along the beaches. I had to ask what those things. I thought they were beehives or some kind of air quality thing.
Yeah. That's us.
Don't forget your.
Oh, yes, thank you. Gee, yeah, that's $100 right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, as much as anything, it was good to have you guys come out there because I think this is all new to most of us.
Okay, yeah, good.
And,
Good.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to plan when we don't know what we're talking about.
Like we said, the goal was
Yeah.
hopefully you've been,
point.
not say you've been educated, but you've got a better understanding of some of the capabilities, and then based on that,
We now know what it's all about. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah. So, okay, perfect. Well, appreciate that.
Thanks, gents.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.
Nice
Nice meeting you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
It's very nice
Yeah,
to meet
nice
you. Yes.
Nice meeting you.
It's mine. Where's my stuff?
For having us out.
Thanks, gents.
Oh, okay. Better.
We need it again for tonight, so I'm just gonna tuck it in the corner. Okay. I unplugged it. I don't know if you needed to.
They sold a box of chocolate. I think it's chocolate.
Yes.
Ow!
Oh, what happened?
Pinched me thumb. New glasses. Okay, there we go. Now I can see. Okay, you guys are welcome to stay, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Langley, I'd probably say.
So I'm next up on the same theme as before. This is the Trailblazers.
Yeah, okay, if we want
Are
to
we going through
That
that?
is
or-
dark.
Oh, I want dark.
I know this
Actually,
is the
it's your
white.
call, Carl. What do you want to
This
do?
one's
Go
my
through
kids
it or
like
go
the
back
white
to
ones.
this?
let's return to the order.
Okay.
So we will now move to item 7B, 2016 preliminary budget, page 7.
Okay. So this is the first step in the 2016 budget process, the preliminary budget. We basically we start with the trial balance, and it feeds into these schedules by department, which is quite a bit more detail than we provided last year, and then flows into the summary page. Basically, last year we showed the summary page just with a little bit of extra detail. But my purpose was to put in the labor model, because we know, the labor is sort of a defined amount. We looked at last year's budget compared to the actual, so I tweaked some of the numbers if they were inaccurate based on how we were tracking this year. my purpose was to come to a number of how much cash was available, which I've determined to be $319,000 prior to any capital expenditures, any supplemental operating requests, or any transfer to or from reserves. As you can see, last year we transferred $180,000 from reserves to fund everything. And last year I know we had talked about maybe hopefully transferring some money to reserves. So to give you a perspective, what's not in here is any supplementary requests. So Mayor and Council, in a report that's coming, has a list of $270,000. Last year's capital was $626,000. Some of that, of course, was funded by a grant. So it was $380,000 of sort of direct costs to the village, and that was considered a kind of a lower capital year. And then in the fire request that I received from the fire chief, he's asked for $145,000 of capital and $45,000 of additional operating. And Public Works, just due to the absence of the Public Works manager, she is currently working on the budget, and the plan is in early January to have the supplemental requests for operating and capital from Public Works and from general government. So I just thought that's a significant number because it keeps everything in perspective in terms of going through wish lists and going through dollar value, and I think it will help Mayor and Council prioritize, given the amount of money they have. So that's with a 5% tax increase, like I say, with none of the extras here in that $319,000. And then just with the subsequent schedules, like I said, I had gone through and just tried to highlight any larger variances. And the other thing that I don't know that we'll find a lot, but I do want to have a second look at this budget to actually see if there's any savings as well. Like we pulled out the obvious infrastructure master plan and things that were one time last year, but I want to go back and further examine if we're tracking quite favorable to budget this year for the year-to-date actual, then make some inquiries as to why, and maybe there's some budgets that we can reduce, but I don't anticipate finding a lot of savings that way. So that's a very high-level explanation of the budget.
Okay, thanks, Pam. Comments?
Question, if I could.
Sure.
Pardon me if I missed it as you're introducing it, but the thing that caught my eye on your first page, page 8 of it, was you're anticipating a drop of 18.3% on revenue, but a drop of 15% on expenditures. I'm not sure I fully understand that.
I think if you sort of look at the detail on the following pages, there's a few things that would have distorted that. For example, we had the Build Canada grant in 2015, and we don't have the Build Canada grant in 2016, plus the $400,000. It wasn't in and out, but there was $400,000 from water. So I had sort of attempted to analyze kind of the revenue in each of the individual pages. Another one was a small community grant, although it's only $26,000. We will get a lower small community grant this year because when we got last year's grant of $310,000, they said there was a 7 to 10% draw from the 2016 grant. They advanced in the 2015. And the big one is the Build Canada grant. That was why. It's a little hard to sort of analyze it on the summary page. That's why sometimes the detailed pages add that. But that jumped out at me as well. I thought an 18% reduction in revenue, but then when I went through and highlighted it, it was the Build Canada, the DFA funding of $400,000, and unfortunately the small community grant. We are going to take a hit on that this year.
But we will adjust the expenditures to balance. Assuming we're not planning a deficit, I take it.
No.
Well, we're not allowed to run a deficit.
I mean, that was just sort of the change in the years. What right now, without any of the extras, we're running essentially a surplus of $319,000. So that's the cash available to council to do capital supplementals and reserves if they choose to transfer some money to reserves.
So, me?
Go.
Okay, I have a whole slew of questions.
Okay.
I don't know, well, right off the bat, I was just wondering, so here's his 2015 budget. Are these actuals?
No,
or
that's what we budgeted last year.
It's a 5-year plan.
Pardon?
It's a 5-year plan.
Okay, so it's what we budgeted last year. Would it not, so are we fairly much on budget?
Yes, as at the third quarter review, we were pretty much on budget. And then I was looking at the year-to-date actuals when I looked at doing the 2016 budget, if there was something that we were like in the revenue numbers, I adjusted some of the costs to reflect better the actual, raising them or lowering them. But that is something I can show in the next version of this budget. I can show what the 2015 actuals are year to date.
And we were fairly much on,
So far, we're tracking on budget. Yes.
okay.
I mean, obviously ups and downs and a few offsetting items, but there wasn't anything that was a flag that we were going way over budget on, or unfortunately way under budget on either.
Got it. So right now, is this what we're calling the data gathering stage? Or is it,
Not so much the data gathering. I like to prefer it almost as the starting point, that we know certain costs we have. So sort of our estimate of what just sort of our base costs are going to be, with no extras in there, no capital, and with the labor model in there, of course. So we've
so what is
assumed,
this labor model?
so it's basically what you have to pay your staff. So some people have a mandated amount for 2016 per contract. Others, I think we put a 1.75% increase in for the remaining staff. And with that, I wanted to see, sort of as a starting point, how much you had left over, because I think that's really important when you start looking at all the supplementals. I mean, right now I have supplementals totaling, probably $600,000. And we know that without drawing anything from reserves, you can only spend $320,000. So I think it helps when you go and look at the extras to help prioritize them when you know. It sort of quantifies what we all know, that there's limited funds in the Village of Lions Bay, but I've put a number to it. It's still just an estimate. It's not, accurate to the dollar, but just to sort of give council an idea of how much money they have to work with for all the extras that they want. And then it's not fair to even call them extras. Like the capital, we have basic capital that's not in here yet, that we have in there every year. Maintenance of capital, things that Public Works needs to just do their job, and things that the fire department does. So the next version, we will have those numbers from staff so that council can have a list, and then they can go through and prioritize and determine what projects they want to include in the budget and what they don't.
So in this budgeting process, because you said this is not the data gathering stage, so when would we have all the data to be able to make decisions, data with regard to costs versus revenues? Is it in here?
This is sort of the base, sorry.
I'll be covering that in my piece. That's fine, Pam. Because I think we've got a bigger plan coming in January.
A different plan?
No, everything's going to fold into what's going to occur in January with the budget. So this is the 20,000 foot budget.
But in terms of your data gathering, we have started that process. We have gathered a lot of data to give you this information, so you know kind of how much money you have to work with. And then that guides you when you look at all the supplemental requests, because, like I said, I've given you some high-level numbers. Just the council list alone totals $270,000. So I think when you have it in your mind, which we sort of didn't have last year, we know how much money, like we didn't have it this early, you know how much money you kind of have to work with. It helps you prioritize. And then we sort of lay on the table everything everyone wants. I envision a process where some will be discarded right away, and as we drill down to the projects we really want, that's when we gather information on how much they will truly cost, rather than just an estimate. We would go in, and then people, staff would, or the managers would put through, or the departments rather, would put through business cases like they did last year for things that they want, so the council can have that information to prioritize and then give staff the direction on what they want to be included in the budget.
I guess my question is, I'm wondering, how do we know that we spent well in 2015? That we're using 2015 as a baseline?
Like I said, I can add a column saying what the 2015 year to date is, so you get a sense of.
Is there something that tells us what we were talking about before, the KP performances? Have we performed well? Is this the performance level we wanted to maintain? How would we know if we want to improve it? If we need more staff, or we need to reduce staff? I don't.
Well, I think
Okay.
You've been here a year now, so you can look at these numbers and
Because right
hopefully
now
have
they're just numbers, right? Telling us how we ran the village last
Yeah.
year.
I think it's a bit more than that. You can a sense of, over this year, did you get what you wanted from the different departments? And this is what it costs to run
Okay.
that department. And like I said, this is a base budget. This is staff's interpretation of, kind of given the status quo, this is what we need to run the village. And then we have this extra $320,000, which has to be used for capital, supplemental operating, and transfers to reserve if you choose to do that.
Okay, let me quickly go through my questions.
Sure.
So going to the consolidated operating budget, so we have line items. I'm just wondering how these what you've identified as line items, they're not the same as when we go into the sort
They
of
should
the
be.
different funds?
In terms of the expense, they should be. I've had to pull out amortization and interest payments. I like to keep it in the same format as required by the charter.
So for
But the
example,
numbers-
in general funds, we have a line that says, well, salaries and benefits. But then when you look over on the consolidated budget, there isn't one, so the salaries and benefits are under administrative services?
This gives you the breakdown. So if you go to administrative services, you see a budget of 565,000. And then if you go to the 2016 budget, the reason it doesn't exactly tie in is the interest.
Exactly, that's why I couldn't.
No, but I'm explaining. The amortization is a separate line. So if you take out the amortization and you will get this 565,529.
Oh, 'cause I was wondering,
that's the extra detail I want, because we didn't provide this last year, and I think that we always looked at the summary, and I think this helps you. You say 565, well, that's what this is made up of.
That's where I got confused.
Yeah.
How does that
So
translate to
most of
that?
them tie in. The exception is anyone that has amortization or the interest payments, which is just water and public works.
Got that.
So this is sort of the drill down of that. So then you can go in and then see these categories of.
And then later on, will we get some information on, do we need it, with regards to our debt, do we need a debt policy? Like do we need understanding of our total debt? What's our debt? I think in the finance committee you mentioned that.
My part coming up.
But to answer your question,
Where is that in the package?
Do we not need to know?
but
or
it's
you
actually
will
in
let
here.
us know?
I
Oh,
mean,
it
we
is?
have the debt we've incurred right now, all the principal and interest payments are in this budget, and they are actual numbers because we know exactly to the penny how much we owe.
So where is,
And it's
we have that?
Yep, it's in the there's the interest payments.
No, the balance sheet.
Well, we don't have the balance sheet, but we have the portion of the debt that impacts your budget, which is the interest and the principal payments. So the interest is here, and it's per your MFA, and then the principal, the debt principal, which actually is a cash outlay as well as in this budget.
I'm just thinking that when we go to actually put together the budget, I would like to know, like our borrowing capacity and all, like all that.
And again, if you give me a little bit of leeway when it comes to my part, I'll cover this for you.
Okay, so, and then, with regards to asset management, do we need to put in maintenance, is maintenance and repair a cost in expenditures?
The base level of expense is, but that's what I'm saying, not the capital maintenance. So that's a piece that has to be added in and has to
So
come
the
out of the
base level is here.
319, yeah.
The
So an example being they need 4 new tires for the trucks, so that's maintenance.
So it's not here or it is
So
here?
that's in there. That's
Well, it would
costed
only
already.
be in if it was standard year over year. The fire chief has capital requests for anticipated repairs on the truck and things like that, and over and above the base would not be in here. And that would come because council has to make a decision on whether or not they want to include that in the budget.
Okay, with regard to staff, have we done an efficiency analysis or workload data or anything like that?
You know, we've
No?
taken our base staff for which we have a contracts with and are obligated to pay, and that is in the budget. If council wants to make a decision on adding or removing staff, then that, again, I would be a business case for that.
Okay, how about, do we have a capital investment plan? I read somewhere that it's a requirement of the gas tax agreement. Am I,
With the gas tax agreement, the gas tax funding we get has to be put towards capital, but there's a lot of flexibility there.
so we don't need to have a capital investment plan?
Well, that is our budget.
It's
But
That's
the
our
long
target.
term,
Oh, we have a 5-year plan.
so that will cover it?
I don't know. I assume so. I have, ultimately I would like a 20-year plan, but it's looking into the future.
But we have the gas tax revenue in this budget,
No,
and it can be used for capital.
I'm just asking, is there a requirement from the government that we need to have a capital investment plan? But if you say that it's part of our 5-10-year plan, because I don't remember us putting in any money into long-term capital expenditure.
Well, that was our capital expenditures last year. I mean, the capital that we purchased by its nature is long-term because it
But
has a
planning
life.
ahead, that's what I was wondering. But I guess
Well,
we'll
we-
know that when we get the infrastructure master
Yeah, well, that
plan.
was really what we were waiting for, was the infrastructure master plan to feed into a long-term plan. And that's why our capital expenditures were lighter last year, in anticipation of the infrastructure master plan to
And then-
guide us.
And then Ron, you said you'll give us the statement of financial position? Is that part of your
I've got
piece?
several things on my stuff and then coming up shortly after the water parcel tax report.
Okay, that's. that was
But just
pretty
in
much it.
terms of the debt, if I just could clarify, we have debt which we are committed to, and those costs are in this budget
Yeah,
because
I-
that is statutory. There will be analysis done later when we talk about potential borrowing, and then the impact of those costs can be added to the budget. But in terms of the debt, it is covered off completely. That is one of the things that probably of all the numbers, it is the most accurate because I know to the penny what we're committed to in our debt, and that is in this budget.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if we plan to spend money on something and we don't have it, I'd like to know how, what's our borrowing capacity, how much do we still?
Yeah,
you
that
know,
would
what's
be
in-
coming. Yeah.
On for 5 more minutes.
Okay, oh, I didn't know you were presenting.
I'm on B.
Okay. That's it for now.
So hopefully that'll help you when you look at it again,
I
is
think
that
so.
basically each line of this has a
Yeah, I
separate
couldn't
sheet
find, I
with the
couldn't match the
detail.
number over here. Like,
Yeah,
oh, what happened?
sorry, I should have made a note about that. It's just the
Yeah.
amortization and the interest, which isn't in every,
So the fact that we put in amortization and we take out amortization means we're actually not amortizing?
we are amortizing. That's a topic where, in a perfect world, we would expense the amortization because it's for future replacement of assets, and we wouldn't remove it. But, I mean, we can't afford to do that because it's $500,000.
Yeah, well, we've had this discussion,
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
currently don't
We
put
don't.
amortization in reserve.
Okay.
But this is, the PSAB is pushing for this presentation, so you're acknowledging the amortization, and it is an in and an out. But rather than completely ignoring, it's sending a message that, in a perfect world, you would be putting aside $500,000 into reserves to cover the amortization. So it's really a presentation issue, and I think this is a more accurate way of presenting a budget.
Okay, good, Helen.
Yes.
So I had a very few, I mean, this is essentially, well, it's more than just a plug of last year's numbers, obviously. So those are my issues. For example, on the water fund, we show $400,000 less revenue this year because we don't anticipate getting a PEP grant.
No, that wasn't the PEP grant, that was the disaster, the landslide we had. And we decided, just for kind of clarity, even though it was an in and out, to just show that we actually, to authorize us to spend it, that we were going to have, it was an in and out, that we would have the expenses to cover the disaster, we would get the PEP funding. This isn't really a grant. This was to cover an actual incident that had occurred during the budget process.
Yeah, so
And
I
to
understand, I
legally-
know.
Yeah.
But is that not capital expenditure?
In that case, it was capital, well, it was a combination of capital and operating.
I mean,
Some of it will
so
be
this budget,
capitalized.
is this an operating budget, or is this a combined operating capital, or it's obviously not capital? My concern is that it's completely lumpy. We can't tell how we're doing year to year because our water revenue goes from 1.37 to 700. So, it's a 46% differential. Is that
Right.
good, bad, or I don't know.
Well, I think just by looking at the detailed water budget, that's why, showing as a separate line, you essentially ignore that. Like I say, it is a bit misleading, but we essentially only put it in the budget last year, so we had the authorization to spend it. That was purely why, and I agree, that's the only item that is a combination of capital and operating. Otherwise, this is an operating
Oh, no,
budget.
there's plenty of other ones where I see that we're mixing gas tax, for example, that is specifically
Mhm. Yeah, some of the
supposed to be
revenue,
a
yeah.
capital item.
Yeah.
So why would we book it as
Well,
revenue?
no, we put it because then it flows through into the 300,000, which now you can use for capital and supplemental operating.
But this is an operating budget. Gas tax is not an operating revenue. It's
But I'm saying in
capital
terms of the revenue, I'm showing all the revenue because I want it to flow
It's a
through
cash thing.
into the 300,000, yes, because it's still a cash budget. So on the expense side, other than the 400,000, these are not capital expenses, these are operating. But for the revenue, the two instances where there is essentially capital revenue, so we never distinguish at West Vancouver between capital revenue and operating revenue because it flows through to the bottom, and then from that bottom, that's what you spend your capital.
Well, we
With-
add back some cash items after the operating, and some cash items you tell me are in the operating. So, I mean, I would like to see true operating expenses above the line and true cash adjustments for capital below the line, just like we do for some things.
Like I said, the only exception is the capital revenue and the water revenue, and I feel by showing it this way, it flows into 319 that you now have available for
Yeah.
all of your extras.
I understand that's the cash, but it's so hard to compare. I mean, essentially, we're showing our revenue dropping by 18%, but that's because we're not booking a grant.
No, but you can clearly see that in the other schedules. I mean, it's the 400,000 and it's the Build Canada grant.
Okay, well, I'll tell that to the village when they say, why is our revenue dropping by 18% and our expenditure going, not going down, but the same. Fred just asked the same question. I'm not going to tell them it's in the schedules. I have to come up with an explanation. And the answer is, it's because of our accounting.
No, you can give them the explanation that I've just given you. I think it's more misleading not to show it and then stick it in the bottom. Oh, and we also have this extra cash at the bottom that we can also spend. And I think this is very transparent. You're showing where all your sources of revenue are.
That's stuff that can be talked about in the executive
Yeah,
summary.
no, exactly.
That's traditionally what's done. In major budgets, that's what you do. You have a summary sheet that outlines, and then it spills out into all this stuff. The only difference is we don't have that right now. You don't have that explanation of all these lines.
In major budgets, you do not mix capital and operating expenses.
No, but you do, you will try and explain them. When you get a senior executive asking questions about that kind of stuff, then that you're gonna have to explain it, and that's generally how it's done.
Well, Jim's right, you do a
And we
short
don't
form
have
disclosure.
capital expenditures in here with the exception of the 400.
Well,
And I
so the
agree,
Whistler grant for a fire pump.
that was last year. We don't have it in here this year.
Yeah, but we do have it in last
But
year's
then where do you
budget.
set, I just think it's more clear. I mean,
But
when you
you're
see
calling
it
it
there.
revenue? It's a capital grant.
It's still revenue, grant is revenue. This is a cash, I'm showing all your cash coming in, and I'm showing how you're gonna spend
Okay,
it.
well, so I mean, so then we must call this cash flow, because it's not an operating statement. To include an $11,000.
Municipalities budget on a cash basis, that's why we have to show
I
the
understand the
principal
difference between
coming
cash
in.
and accrual. I'm talking about the financial statements. I fully understand the difference between cash and accrual.
But that's what I'm saying is that we don't budget like the financial statements, and that's a challenge of a municipality, it is a cash basis. And that's why we would never do this in the private sector, but I have to show that you have payments of debt principal
Yes,
coming up
and
because
that
you're
goes below the
required to
line.
pay the cash.
That goes below the operating line in the
But it's
consolidated
still,
statement.
but it's taken away before I tell you that you have 320,000 left to spend.
I understand the arithmetic. Okay, so we don't seem to allocate revenue to any of the smaller funds. The Bylaw Services Fund, the EOC Services Fund, the Parks and Rec Fund. The revenue that's shown is fees, licenses, permits, and fines. That's it. So if we look at, for example, Parks and Recs, the budget is $16,000 revenue and $156,000 expenditure.
Yeah, no, we don't allocate.
So
I mean,
what's, I mean, there's,
there's another option which I did think of doing, but it was too time consuming at the time. I wanted to show you the detail of the revenue, but I can just do a separate revenue schedule because it's a bit misleading to show it allocated to the department. Because we don't do revenue allocations, it's just whoever earns it. A lot of municipalities just show it all coming into the general administration, like that's where the taxation
well,
comes in.
so I mean, my point
It's
is,
just-
there's no point in separating out into funds, general fund, Parks and Rec, general fund, bylaw services, if they're not in balance, because it's not an administrative tool. It's
This is to show you that that's the fees and charges related to planning and development. That's the fees and charges. I mean, I can show it as a separate revenue schedule for the next reports
well.
and just show
What are you
expenses.
pointing at? Sorry.
You were talking about planning and development. I'm saying that revenue is revenue associated with planning and development. It's
Well,
the bylaw fees.
That happens
and
to be the one that actually balances.
But you can't think of it in terms of balancing. That's why I didn't show a surplus and a deficit,
No, I
because we
understand.
don't. And I agree. I mean, if you would find it easier, I could pull, I just thought this provided more detail rather than showing a lump sum of fees and charges. I'm showing you the way in which the fees and charges are collected, but I can pull all the revenue out and just show it in a separate schedule. And then just show the expenses of the departments, because the departments aren't intended to break even and make and balance.
Yeah, they're not cost centers. They're not being run as cost centers. So that
I just thought it would help with clarity clarity, because this is building permit revenue, so it's in planning and development.
Well, it's
Rather than
it's the
showing-
minimal amount of revenue that can be allocated to that particular
It's not
function.
allocated, it's actually, they collect it, it's
It comes
planning and
from it.
development. Yeah, because just to be clear, though, I don't do allocations. But I can lump it all together. I was just concerned for the first draft, for clarity, if I just had a line fees and charges, it would have been this huge number. So this is giving you a sense of where the fees and charges come from.
It is the fees and charges, yeah, but we have no allocation on the biggest revenue number. That just is a massive lump sum that gets spent. So, you
And
know,
I don't think it should be allocated personally, it's taxation. You don't allocate it. I mean, I'm even a little uncomfortable with the way we allocate it to fire, in all honesty, because there's implication that the fire department will then have a surplus or a deficit. And then that's where we get into trouble, because if there's a surplus, they think it's their money.
I get you. I mean, you probably do the allocation after the fact, but
But we don't allocate, that's what I'm saying, I'm just trying to
No,
make
in
that
order to
point,
make it
there's
make
no
sense.
allocation.
so the water contingency budget, looking at the draft water budget at page 17, we added $60,000 to expenditure for water. Where do we see that, and where do we see whether we spend it this year or not?
I can show that in the next version. I can show the year-to-date actual. I think that would be helpful. And just to, what I want to say about the water budget is this is highly preliminary. It's almost too preliminary to show, because I haven't a chance to go over it with the Public Works Manager. We're doing that this week. It was just to sort of give you a bit of a sense. But
Okay, so Ron, I mean, 2 months ago you secured council's wish lists on a deadline and sat down with Pam to give a sense of them. Are they in here or not?
no, they're not in here.
Why?
Because that's what I explained at the beginning. I wanted to just put the minimum in here, the things that we're required to do, so you could see how much money you had left before you started looking at, because they have to be looked in relation to the capital request, they have to be looked in relation to transfers to reserves. To me, this guides council when they have their huge list of the things they want, and this is how much money we have. It helps you prioritize and maybe take some right off the list before staff does any work of analyzing how much it's going to cost.
Okay,
And do
whether we
business
put it in
cases.
first or second really makes a little difference. If that number showed a minus $465,000 available to spend, then we know we're $465,000.
But I think that would have been hugely misleading, because you're only looking at mayor and council supplementary requests. We have to look at all of the capital requests from Public Works, and from
They're
general,
not
and from
available
fire.
yet?
No, they're not.
Well, I know, and fire has been available for at least a month. I've seen it.
Fire has been available, but I think it's misleading to put it into the budget until council has a chance to discuss it and give us guidance on what should be in the budget. I mean, the burn building's in there. And then the Public Works Manager's been away. She hasn't had a chance to do her budgets. We don't have any water, sewer, solid waste, Public Works requests in there.
Okay,
Because I think we need, this is an important point, we need guidance from council to say, usually that's the first step, that we want to put money in reserves or we don't, the whole $300,000 is available. The requests we have are still probably going to be 3 times that. So before, I feel sometimes there's, to jump into the detail before you get the big picture causes a lot of extra work and a lot of confusion.
okay. Well, Ron?
I'll come back to this on my next point, if that's fine, Carl.
Yeah, no, I'm
The only-
done.
The only thing I would mention is that part of the, this is neither side of the fence on this one, presentation that Pamela's done is identical in the format to the third quarter that we saw a month ago. So, I mean, it seems to me logical that the way she's presenting it now is the way she presented it then. And the next derivative of it, when we see the 25 actual, the 25 budget, and the potential for the 2016, it should all sync before we get behind the cells.
Well, I think what we said at the end of the presentation of the third quarter was to re-amalgamate bylaw services, EOC services, and some, I can't remember what. So it's kind of silly to show a $15,000 line item in its own separate schedule, but
I was only doing that for detail. It's protective services in the financial statements. I can easily amalgamate it. I spread it out as thinly as possible. I felt to give you more information. So when you looked at protective services, you didn't think it was just fire. I mean, I know there's small areas EOC, but I mean, if you want me to consolidate more, I'm more than happy to do that. I was just trying to give you detail.
Yeah.
It seemed to be requested last year during the budget process. I was often asked to go back and provide more details, so I wanted
well,
to provide it
ultimately
up
we
front.
want line item details so that we know, for example, there's a $15,000 budget for a website and a $2,000 for because that's the level on which council wants to understand what is it agreeing to. So when we see an administrative services number of $565,000, this is a breakdown, but we still don't know what it's being spent on.
Well, you have a further breakdown of general fund administration. And then, if there's numbers in there you want a further breakdown of, I can provide that.
Yeah, I mean, as I
I
mentioned
don't-
several times, it came as somewhat of a surprise to me that staff knew, for example, that there was a website budget. Council didn't. I think if anybody needs to know that it's council, we need to know what we're agreeing to. At about a level of about $1,000, I get jealous at every $1,000. Okay, well, I mean, this is fine as far as it goes. It gives us a sense of where we are. We don't know where we stand in terms of our balance sheet, our statement of financial position, so we don't know what our reserve levels are right now.
No. That comes after year end. I mean, I have to see how much we've drawn down for reserves at the year end, so I'll be doing that in early January.
Well, I mean, with these numbers here, you can project. So, I mean, at least to give us a sense, we're hoping to get something out of the former finance committee in terms of prudent reserve levels. But okay, is this what you're going to speak on, Ron? Or are you
I'm
going
going to cover part of this too.
Okay, but do you want to go on to the water tax, the parcel tax stuff now?
I think we should go through that, and then we'll, if we
Do an
need to circle
amalgamation.
back, then we'll come back to it.
Okay, so what do we do with this now? What's the next step for council in terms of this preliminary budget?
The next step would be, we would be coming after we will fine tune the water, sewer, and solid waste budgets are the first priority because we have to set the rates by the end of January in order to get the bylaw. So I will be meeting with the Public Works Manager. She's on vacation after this week, but meeting with her this week, and then early January we will have sort of her supplemental requests. We'll have the capital requests, and then we'll come forward to council, similar to your list of mayor and council supplementary requests, and then the next stage is determine which one of those you want to include in the budget. We will have information on reserves. Any other detail you want provided for this, just let me know and I can provide it. I just caution looking at a budget in terms of a line-by-line item. I mean, we could do that. We would have to dedicate a whole meeting to going through that.
Well, we don't have to do it in a meeting. We can do it separately and say yes, no, I'm liking this, and come up with a consolidated opinion. That's Ron's job. Yeah, that sounds fine.
Because my main purpose was just to let council, I feel this is critical, know how much money you have. With a 5% tax increase,
Well, that's
how much
assuming
money you
a
have.
few things that
Of
the
course
numbers
it is. Of
the
course
numbers
it
in
is.
here are satisfactory, which we don't know what's in them yet, except for the breakdown that's been given. So the final number is predicated on that, and the final number is predicated on a guess at revenue increase. You know, we haven't discussed that yet at all.
No, we haven't.
It may be that we want no tax increase. Maybe that we want double that. I don't know what the number is. We have some opportunities, as you know, for major capital inflows from land sales and others that presumably need to be budgeted tentatively. Or how do you budget for the likelihood of a land sale?
We'd have to see how definite it was because, I mean, I guess you could put it into the budget, and if it didn't go through, you'd have to do a budget amendment. But then you'd also have to look at the restrictions on the money from that land sale. Generally, it has to go into reserve and can only be used for very, very limited.
Well, I'd like to know what it would do to our reserves. My main concern today is what's the state of our reserves. I have absolutely no idea. I try to keep track myself, but I've lost it. Okay, so then there was only sort of one other issue. There were 4 extraordinary budget items approved by council through the course of the year. Phone system, I can't remember what the rest of them were. Are they in this 2015 budget?
Well, no, because we didn't revise our budget. They would just be reflected in the actual.
So we will overspend on certain items, or even...
It would come out evenly, and then when I do the reserve analysis.
Because
you know,
in every case we said it was a draw on reserve.
Exactly. Otherwise, we would have had to do a budget amendment.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, they were brought forward to council saying, we have this extraordinary expense and this is how we're covering it off, but that's a reflection of your actual. And I can put the actual in here. You know, just recognizing that as we go through the year-end process, the numbers will be adjusted as more invoices come in. So that's my sort of reluctance to sometimes put in there, although you say it's draft. I think there's this perception if you're looking at in January, then it's final. And it's often not close to final, and invoices come in until the end of January.
Is a pro forma adequate to form budget on, or do we really need to see the real final numbers for 2015?
No, you don't need to see the
We
the
can
final
get close
numbers,
enough.
yeah. I mean, that's basically where staff comes in, and we have done some of that already. I mean, just a small thing, but I looked at bank charges, and for whatever reason, we've always under budgeted that, and we know what our bank charges are, so I changed the budget to reflect the actual. Conversely, building permits.
I saw that.
We
the building
unfortunately
permits,
have
yeah.
over budgeted that. I looked
Yeah.
at the actual. We did a couple of $100 in the first quarter, and then $3,000 for every subsequent quarter. So I thought a reasonable budget was $12,000, $3,000 a quarter. I think that's staff's job to look at the actual numbers and to tweak them accordingly,
There goes a
which
one.
I've done in this preliminary budget. But I've made no assumptions over than that because I don't think that's my role. My role is to tell council my best estimate of how much money you have available to guide you in making your decisions on how you spend the money.
Well, that
this-
number is not a great number.
No. I'm totally taking in what you're saying, and I can do more detail. I mean, I wished I'd had more time to maybe put the revenue all together, because I think it is misleading to show the revenue by department. But I just thought it would help. It would make you understand what was in the fees and charges, but I can consolidate that.
Well, I
I can
think you-
provide you
and I-
more detail.
I can already see that you've tightened up on a lot of numbers, which is good. Like, for example, the contract services for sewer budget, presumably. We never spent 11,750 for pump outs. So,
Well, that was the infrastructure master plan. All I pulled out is the infrastructure master plan.
okay. But
And that's what and the water, sewer, and solid waste, like I say, we haven't really looked at that a lot. So that will be tightened up the most for the next budget presentation, because the fee increase has to be locked down by the end of January.
okay, well then let's move on to those the next report, which is page 21.
So this is a report on, we've discussed this previously, the water user rates and the parcel tax restructure. So essentially, we have a water parcel tax that predates Brunswick Beach. So it's only just non-Brunswick Beach residents pay for it. And it predated the requirements for parcel taxes that are now in the community charter. So this has been going on, I showed you from the background, since 2007. It's, I think, been recommended that we get rid of the parcel tax. So the recommendation is to repeal bylaw 130. We would no longer have that parcel water tax. And then we would get the revenue just through our general rate increase in the water budget, which would impact everyone. So for Brunswick Beach residences, the only impact is in the communication would be you're paying the same, it's just you're not paying the parcel tax, so your property tax bill is lower, and that exact amount, that would increase your water bill, with the exception of Brunswick Beach. They would, because they've never paid the parcel tax, they won't have that savings, and they will see a higher water rate because of that. And then we have already touched on this with the little kind of explanation that I send out with the water rates last year. We touched on this,
Yeah.
warning people it was coming. So it shouldn't be a surprise. And my recommendation for communication is a letter that actually is mailed individually to all the Brunswick Beach residents, just so that they know. We can explain it to them.
Now my concern is, what about all the 484s that Brunswick Beach has missed?
Yeah,
How do we catch that up?
I'm not sure that we can.
I think that
It's just on a go-forward
passed
basis.
in the finance committee. Last year it was recognized that to go back to 1985.
Is that when it is? I thought it was 2007.
No, that was the first time it was recommended that we get rid of the parcel
Oh, I see.
tax.
That would
Yeah.
be, I think we'd be lined up out the door on that one. So the good news is that it's only $448.
No, hang on, it's not 1985, it's 2005. That's when the water system was upgraded. Brunswick Beach was only brought in to the municipality in 99. So it's certainly not going to be back, well, 85 is not that much further before that. But, we're talking about 15 years of how many properties? It's all Brunswick Beach minus 29 properties who have not paid $484 a year.
But that goes up every year. I think originally in 1985, it was $60.
The parcel tax.
Yeah, and it's gone up every year.
Okay, well, there's a number
Yeah.
that they are now short. That not, you could also make the case that the parcel tax was too high for the rest of Lions Bay because at least for the last 3 years, we've at the principle that we're going to balance the budget on water. So it would seem to me that the only way to recover this from Brunswick Beach, the let's say in round numbers 10 years, more like 15 years actually, of unpaid parcel tax, is to keep them on a special parcel tax and move Lions Bay and Brunswick onto a same rate utility fee, user rate. Because how many properties are we talking about in Brunswick Beach?
29.
20 it was 29 that paid up.
29 that we don't want to, 29 that we know did not pay. Somebody.
It's 29.
Yeah.
Everybody else elected to pay
To upfront.
upfront.
No, that's
Yeah.
for separate. That's for the water system to join Lions Bay system. That's a different parcel tax.
They will continue to pay that.
Yeah, they continue to pay that.
So it's all of Brunswick
Almost
Beach
all of Brunswick, sorry.
didn't pay the 484. What is this year would be 484, or last year was 484. The whole of Brunswick Beach. So in round numbers, how many properties are we talking about? 50?
50-ish, 30.
50-ish.
Yeah.
So I mean, $500 times 50, that's $25,000 a year for 15 years.
Well, no, because it was $60.
Yeah, okay, fine. So
Sliding scale,
And-
but it's still a big number.
it's still a big number.
But also, you would ding the the current Brunswick Beach resident with that. I mean, you can't go after people who have sold their property since 1985. It's not the
Parcel
same
tax
owner.
attaches. You're
To the
right.
owner, yeah.
To the property, the current owner of the property. That property has had a free ride for 15 years.
It has.
Yeah,
But
but
I'm
in
just-
fairness to the people of Brunswick, though, is it their fault that they were charged it?
No, not their fault at all. But they've still had a free ride. They have to pay for it. They just
Well,
have to start
not sure
paying now.
legally. I mean, it was something we'd have to look into legally if we could even do that.
Well, the rest of Lions Bay did. They paid for the upgrade.
It's time to balance that side of it, that's pretty clear, it's been clear for a long
Yeah.
time. We need to balance the
That's right.
books in that respect.
That's right.
Because there's lots of mixed feelings about that in the village,
There is.
and so we need to clear the table, and that Carl's right from that point of view.
There is. And I think that is a good point, that it's, I mean, I became aware of this. There's residents, not non-Brunswick residents, are aware that Brunswick Beach is not paying their fair share. So I mean.
Oh, sure. That's
it's,
how it came to council's attention in the first place. So the 484 from last year, that was slated as a parcel tax to pay the capital costs, each property's capital share of the capital costs of the upgrade.
No, I wouldn't be that specific. I think it was just, we decided what the water rates would increase to pay, and it was just seen as a source of revenue to pay for all of water.
So
The
it was-
distinction wasn't made between capital
It
and
was
operating.
done really badly.
It was a source of funds. Well, that's,
I
like I
think
say,
the number was
it's
just
not a
selected
true
and
parcel
called a
tax.
parcel tax.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
On the
it
other
really-
hand, we know exactly how much capital expenditure needs to be repaid from the water upgrades because we took 2 loans for it, or 1 loan, I think. Well, 2 loans actually. So the servicing costs of the loans are in theory what a parcel tax could be used to pay for. Now, I take your point that you want to bring it into a user fee.
It has to be. It doesn't qualify for parcel tax.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
So that the servicing of the loan, which is sort of the cost of the water system, needs to be shared between 548 parcels, not the current 500 in round numbers. So they will start paying their fair share from 2016. How do they catch up for the part that they didn't pay?
I'm not sure they can.
If I may, Pamela's recommendation is to repeal, and as she presented, she's not going backwards, correct me if I'm wrong, Pamela, but to go forward for the current tax and utility fee year. So I think there's kind of 2 things. One, if that's a specific ask, which council has to specifically address. The permutation that you brought up, Carl, is do we go retroactive? And that's a decision process.
I think with legal advice to see even, I mean, that would be the
And
first step.
actually,
Could we even do it?
With legal advice,
Yeah.
probably on that.
Yeah, we certainly want to take advice. And we were talking,
So,
in round numbers, 15 years in round numbers, $500 a year, $5 grand per property.
so I would think on, you may want to consider this for tonight to, bring this forward as a resolution to proceed with this, this piece for 2016. The second one is whether you want to go retroactive.
Oh, no, I definitely don't want to go back and try and fix it a third time. It's got to all be right. We've got to decide this once and for all this year. It's been ticking over for 5 years.
Well,
Yeah,
if you decided to go after the $5,000, I think you'd have a riot on your hand.
You couldn't do it all at once. No, it would have to be over 10, 15 years like everybody else.
We'd have to do it over 10 years or whatever the case
Right.
is to make it equitable.
So the parcel tax under which we are charging the 484 this year, what was the duration of that parcel tax? Or was it not promulgated as a result of...
That goes back to 1985. That's the parcel tax we want to repeal.
That was just an ongoing parcel tax?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't qualify as
No,
a parcel tax
clearly.
now.
However, if Brunswick Beach, which is 100 properties, 50 properties, start paying their retroactive cost of the overall water system, then the 1272 goes down a little bit, including Brunswick Beach 1272. A little bit. You can do the math. It's $100. Goes down $100 overall. But sorry.
No, go ahead, I'm interested.
But Brunswick Beach will have to pay over, it'll be a real parcel tax. They need to catch up on their share of the capital cost of the water system over the number of years that we decide. And I see that we gave Brunswick Beach for their little water system, their separate water system. In 2005, they were given 30 years to pay.
If I could suggest Councillor McLaughlin's suggestion, this recommendation goes tonight, so we can proceed, repeal the bylaw. Because this second piece, if we decide to do it retroactively and do a parcel tax, that would always be a separate piece. We'd have to get legal advice, find out if it qualifies for a parcel tax, and it could be implemented in time for the July taxes this year if we did go ahead with it. Like, I still see it as two separate pieces, so I would like this recommendation still to go tonight, because
We don't lose anything.
we don't lose anything, and this has to be done quickly, so we can repeal it in time to amalgamate it all for the tax bills that have to go out, at the end of February.
Although
And
that if we
then-
do this, if we do catch up with Brunswick Beach, then the 1278 is too high.
It is, but I would argue that by the time you went through all the stages, and if council even agreed to do a retroactive fee, it would hit the July property tax, and we could, put the money we get for
So
that
until the
1 year
following
into a
year.
reserve or something, and use it for,
I don't think we should think of it as a retroactive tax. It's finally starting the tax for something that's been provided.
it is retroactive though, because the only reason you can give for only putting the parcel tax on Brunswick Beach, I mean, how would you explain that you're only putting a parcel tax on Brunswick Beach?
Again,
It would be because of the retroactive nature.
Again, we're taking a number that we know has been spent, and this was an issue when Brunswick Beach was brought in.
Yeah.
Everybody thought, a lot of people thought that Brunswick was taking advantage of the situation and Lions Bay was gonna pay for this for a long time. And it looks like part of that was true.
That
So
is what happened. In
Yeah,
fact.
so what we need to do is we need to balance that. That's one of the things that this council is big on. We
Right.
wanna make sure that we're equitable in everything that we
Yes.
do. And so to spread it across the village fairly, we need to be able to say, this is the amount of money that has not been paid by Brunswick for services and stuff that's been provided, and that needs to be
Yeah.
caught up by
Exactly.
such and such a date, and we need to put a plan in effect to deal
do
with
that.
that. And then at that point in time, moving forward, any decisions we make around the entire village now includes the entire village,
Yes.
and the expenditures are all divided evenly,
Yes.
and now the playing field is level.
Yeah.
And that's the only way we can do it
That's right.
equitably.
And to me, I think the first step, is to get the legal opinion on whether or not
Oh,
we
no,
can do it.
of course, yeah.
Actually, I think the first step is, and I presume Mayor Burr will do this, he'll bring this forward tonight, whether council chooses to go backwards or not. Because if the majority of council is a no, then we're moving on with this.
What does mean then that the rest of Lions Bay has subsidized,
The
Brunswick
number
Beach
for
to the
many
tune
years.
of, I mean, ultimately, I would still like to see an analysis of this, that this putative parcel tax was to cover the cost of investment in the water infrastructure. We know what the Brunswick Beach piece was. It's $365 for 30 years. And some people paid it up front, some people are paying it as a parcel tax. Fine. There was also a piece that benefited all of Lions Bay. I have heard the argument that the Lions Bay piece didn't benefit Brunswick Beach, although it was for treatment plant and intake upgrades too, in fact, that obviously supplies Brunswick Beach water. They need to pay their share of that as well. So the question is, it's very well known what the capital cost was because we took a loan for it. I think we may have spent some reserves as well, don't know. But we can work it out, what needed to be covered.
It's the retroactive nature that concerns me. I think that's why we need the legal opinion. I'm not sure you can go back
We can,
in the form
we
of
can go
parcel
forward.
tax.
And they've got 35 years to pay, or 30 years to
But
pay.
for what? Something that's already happened, and that's my concern. This is where I can't stress enough the legal opinion. I totally agree with what you're saying. Of course, Brunswick Beach, it appears hasn't paid their share, but I would almost argue the legal opinion, it's almost better to protect council rather than putting the question first, the resolution, to actually retroactively
Okay.
do it until
but
we've had the legal
that's-
opinion.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
But what we're stating here is that merely, we need, do we know what the amount is?
Yes, we
that's
could
been-
calculate that.
Okay, so if we've got a calculation.
We could do that.
Then we can draw a line in the sand and say, at this point in time, so now we get a legal thing saying, can we actually do that?
Yeah.
And if we can, that would
Yeah.
clear things.
Well, there's an additional wrinkle, is that we then have to decide how much of the combination of user rate and parcel tax that has been paid by Old Lions Bay over the last, since the water system was put in, how much of that was to service the infrastructure cost.
Well,
And I think we have a breakdown on that.
Actually, that's an excellent point, because the parcel tax is so vague. It was just another way of
Yep.
raising money, and it was not for a specific
It was never-
project.
no.
That's really another reason why, aside from everything, we have to repeal it.
Yeah.
So that would be a very challenging number.
We'd have to maybe
be
just
supportable
guess.
number, yeah.
We
So
could
then-
guess that the water should cost about 800 a year 5 years ago, 900 a year this,
Yeah.
and then the rest was to
Unfortunately,
pay.
that parcel tax, it really was just another form of user fee.
You do
And
have
lumped
to-
together, it paid for the
we
system.
do, and I go back to this, and you may be sick of hearing me saying it, but look at the due diligence side of it. We're attuned to a problem. We know it's in existence. We know it's caused abrasion in the past in the village. So we need to fix it the best way we can. So we make a decision, once we get the legal advice, we make a decision to do so. And then we look and take our best estimate at what the number is, and that's it.
No, we have to bite the bullet here. Gus,
Yeah.
sorry, Helen.
So I don't really understand all this. So currently the people who have not paid up front are paying a parcel.
No, that's something separate, sorry. It's, there was a bylaw 368, which is a real parcel tax for Brunswick Beach Water to join the Village of Lions Bay
It was a pipeline
water
that was
system.
brought up the
There was a
creek and-
fixed cost, and some chose just to pay it up front, and some chose to pay it in the form of a parcel tax. So that stands.
Okay,
This
that
bylaw
stands.
130 was
Okay.
very generic. It predated the community charter, and it was just a way of collecting money for water. But because it predated Brunswick Beach, when Brunswick Beach came on board, they weren't part of that parcel tax, so they didn't have to pay it.
So they've
So
been
they've never
exempt,
paid it.
And so what you're suggesting or recommending is that we take them away from the exemption.
The parcel tax
That
is
we get
almost
rid
a
of the
red herring.
parcel tax,
The-
yeah.
The fact is that Brunswick Beach has not paid for the upgrades to the water
That's
system
right. And that's
that they
what
are
we-
using.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking
The
about.
parcel tax is of no consequence. As Pam says, it was just another way of collecting.
But to answer
Yes,
your question,
Your point is
yes.
correct.
Yes.
There's a gap between when they joined the village to today, where the rest of the villagers were paying an amount that they did
Yeah.
not.
So they haven't been paying the same for their water as
What was
other
that-
residents.
Does anybody know what was the rationale behind it then?
Just there was no Brunswick Beach. So when Brunswick Beach came on board, you couldn't retroactively add them to the parcel tax. So in a perfect world, the parcel tax would have been repealed then, and then we just would have collected all of the money through user fees. So I mean, it's a bit odd. It took me a while to understand it.
How
When I
many
first
years-
started,
How many years has this gone on for?
Since 2005.
2005. So we should say we turn the water off for 7 years. And we're even.
Yeah, then we'll be even. Pam, is parcel tax deferrable over age 65?
parcel tax is part of your property tax bill, so it is deferrable. So that will be the other implication.
So
Is
that's the other
people-
implication.
For the people who defer their taxes, you can't defer the water tax, so the water tax bill will go up.
The user
and they
rate.
can't- The user rate, yeah. So their water bill will increase because of the parcel tax, and
So
they
it's a
can't
double
defer
whammy.
it. Just for the people who defer their taxes.
That's half,
Um,
more than half the
It's
village.
about 30%, I believe. So, but unfortunately, it's aside from all this argument, it's not a true parcel tax, and we really,
So from
aside
that
from all
stand-
the other arguments, that alone is a strong enough reason, I believe, to get
I
rid of the
agree.
parcel tax.
I think you're
yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not illegal, but I still think we should.
So Pam, is your recommendation that we table this pending a legal opinion?
No, the second part.
The
Just the
second part?
second part.
yeah.
I'd like
So
this
yes-
resolution to still go
Yes
through
to
if
this,
we
it's
could.
on before us.
Yeah.
That's decision tonight. The other part's off the table till it comes forward again.
Well, we need to get it. I want it done
Quickly.
I want it done by the tax bill, so that people know.
I mean, I can't see why it wouldn't be done with a lawyer and.
Yeah, I mean the legal opinion is pretty cut and dried, I would
Yeah,
think.
I think that's.
The calculation is we're going to have to. There's going to have to be some explanation around the calculation to make sure it's
Yeah.
equitable, and we will err on the side of favouring the
Yeah.
Brunswick residents.
Yeah. How I see it is the best we can quantifying the amount that Brunswick Beach Brunswick Beach
Freudian slip.
did not
Who do
pay.
you know there?
Brunswick Beach did
Brunswick
not
what?
pay.
It was very
And
new
look at
for
our,
an interview.
to me, make it even more general. What are our options of recovering the money? To me, that's what the,
As a matter of principle, I mean, why would we give a fifth of the village a free ride?
but that's what I'm saying, like, let's be open. What are our options? It could be a parcel tax, it could be a ride. The legal opinion may said it's water under the bridge, pardon the pun, that we can't recover it. But make it broader, like go in saying, what are our options to recover?
Okay.
Can't
This
imagine
shortfall.
legal can recover that, you can't recover it.
Okay. Anything more on this?
So then Brunswick Beach will still pay the 365, and then
Yes.
also the user rate tax that we're all paying.
Yes, and everyone's user rate will go up, but for non-Brunswick Beach residents, they won't have to pay the parcel tax, so it'll be a wash. They'll just be paying it a bit earlier in the year. But for Brunswick Beach residents, because they never had the parcel tax, they will be hit with this increase in the water with no offsetting savings on their property tax bill.
And there's a slight wrinkle that the people who currently defer their taxes will end up paying $484 more
Yeah,
than they used
they
to.
can't
Or
defer.
how much do you defer? All of it, or
Well, because it was the whole parcel tax could be deferred.
The whole
because
parcel tax.
It's part of your property tax.
so they're going to have to come up with another, in round numbers, $500 for the utility bill in February, right? Yeah, that's gonna hurt. People on fixed income or no income, they're going to have to.
It'll hurt the ones that defer for economic reasons, and not everyone does. So that,
Sure.
I mean, I'm not making light of it, but a lot of people defer
Oh, if
just.
the government wants to lend you money for nothing, sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, this 1272 number, is that cast in stone, or are you just asking us to
Oh, no,
repeal the
this
bylaw?
this was just an example based on last year's numbers. I don't know what this year's numbers are. It was just to show you that it was a wash for Lions Bay property owners and not a wash for Brunswick Beach property
Okay,
owners.
so the recommendation is to repeal the parcel
130.
tax bylaw and apply the consolidated water rate to all residents. I think
So
that's
then
fairly
everything
straightforward.
will come forward at the new rates in
Yeah,
January.
yeah. And then at the next council meeting, we'll bring forward the repeal of bylaw 130. This is just allowing staff to do it, and then we'll bring forward the report to repeal it.
That's the start of placing the Band-Aid on.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good. Thanks. I'm looking forward to getting this sorted out for all kinds of good reasons, just because it's good housekeeping if nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fine, thanks. Everybody good there? So we know what we're going to talk about tonight.
We'll bring that forward today.
You're going to have to do that on table? Okay, fine. Good. But there's everybody is prepared to waive notice on that one? Okay, good. Let's move on to the next one. Let's just check on the budget.
D 2016 budget considerations, that's me,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
I can run, thank you. This will be page 25, and there's some spreadsheet CAD on the following pages, which is the, as I said, the council concentric stuff. Not to repeat what's been written here, but I've taken out as much as possible normal operational issues, because that's Pamela's part. And these are more, as I said, council priority list, resident beneficial, or strategic combination of stuff. And really the ultimate piece here, in conjunction with Pamela's using her 325,000 number as the, for lack of a better term, free cash flow for everybody's wish list, the chief, the staff, works department. As Pamela said, there's more asks than there is money, so we're sending everybody away with their Christmas break with lots of data to start thinking about where they want to put their priorities. so that when we do come back in January, and I'm gonna suggest that I do the mayor, I go through this and we quickly skin off a bunch of things, so we skinny the numbers down from our stuff, what are really important. Really, the overall objective of what Pamela's done, what I'm doing here, is to be early informed and to accelerate conclusion of the 2016 budget process, which will result in early execution of the decisions made. I would really look, relative to Pamela's work on her presentation, look at her background comments, which are on page 7. It really tells you what she's done. There's been semantics discussion about presentation. The presentation that she's done matches the third quarter, so I mean, I forget where she came from on this one. The next piece here is that tomorrow is the 16th. The next council meeting is in 11 business days on the 5th. And during that period, there'll be no CAO or Public Works Manager input, so some of this is basically, we've got a stale period. So not a lot is going to be put forward. But I'm pleased that Pamela did the parcel tax and the water user stuff, so that's also a piece in the mix. For January 5th, we would like to see and she's agreed to provide the other source of funding, which is the borrowing component. So we've got the cash flow from our normal operations. As Carl's mentioned, there may be a potential sale of an asset. That may be a piece that also needs to be explored, whether we can borrow that. But also for the January 5th, Pamela's been asked to provide a full background and calendar of potential dates for potential borrowing, which would work into hopefully the infrastructure master plan needs, but it may also be used for different components of our piece here. And so that'll be on the basis of interim and short-term borrowing. And I've asked her to provide the actual calculations to Helen's Heart and showing numbers of $1 million or $1.1 million, which more or less is what I think is about 65% of our borrowing capacity. So that with that, council's got their outside number of what they can do. The aim ultimately is that for January the 19th, staff has got a more fully prepared and robust prepared budget with all of the departments. Nikki's piece in staff's request, and I don't know what that looks like. It'll also have given the CAO some time to look at the personnel complement, the personnel cost to sell, because as Helen has pointed out, and I'm not in a position to debate this, do we have too many people? Do we have too few people? There's the issues of the on-call and the overtime component at the works department. Do we need another person? So there's a whole bunch of stuff which has to come into extremely granular data. And so what she's done here is big picture 20,000, I'm at 20,000. We start going down to sea level pretty quickly in January. And so that, council shouldn't look specifically at the nits today, just use the numbers for what they are, so that as you go away for the Christmas break, you start thinking knowing that we've seen what the chief's asks are, don't know what Nikki's are, we can speculate what the infrastructure master plan would be. So I think that's really your takeaway, so that you're coming back prepared, because staff and the CFO will start being very particular with the information that they give forward. And I think that's my piece on this. Any questions?
You want the feedback in time for the January 5th meeting, or at the January 5th?
January 5th, I can't see
Like,
it.
Pam's not going to have any time to
She
process.
can't, no, but
No.
what she's going to do is give the full borrowing 101
Do the
and
debt
practical
presentation.
examples
Okay.
out.
Yeah.
So that's the next piece of capital financing, is the debt component. So
Okay.
we've got the cash flow, we're going to have the debt, and then there's the other one, potentially.
Okay, so what I suggest, how this should go, as the deadline, I'll be guided by you in a minute, but I think what we need to do is to take this spreadsheet and put columns across the side here for each of us to say, yes, I agree to spend 4,000, 7,000, not this 1,000, not this 3,000, and have a total for each of us.
Yeah, the key point here, thank you, Carl. The deal here is, and Pamela touched on this, is that we can't have staff dissipate their time looking at things that we may not go with.
We've got to come up with a consensus.
Exactly as you say, that when we come through and I'm going to guess that many of these will be quite similar, or within a very narrow band. So, I mean,
You got many of them, but I must say I already have 15
I've already
more.
got two more that I, just in the thinking, so.
So I'm just wondering how to handle that, but I'll think that through.
Before
Are
I,
we adding to it, or are we
why not?
subtracting?
Yeah.
You're adding
should add-
before you
should add
subtract.
to it. The document doesn't go away, Helen, it's for the next 3 years, so I mean, if it's
Yeah.
not gonna hit this budget, it may next one. And I think that, I'm going to be away, so that as my co-chair colleague, regrettably, Carl, I'm gonna ask you to keep the document live, and if you could push it forward.
Sure. So deadline. There's no sense in getting it ready for the 5th because.
Oh, no.
Pam's
No,
gonna-
no, I think
But
that,
Maybe
do
the
we want to have
19th.
something for the next meeting?
I think
Yeah,
the
I think so.
19th, it's gotta be done, so that council's ready to say, here's our 270,000, which we're prepared to skinny down to, whatever that number
Well,
might
at least
be.
a week before that. You need at least a week to play
Well,
with it.
January 19th was the first time you'll be seeing the additional requests from Public Works and the capital. So
Yeah.
to me,
It's a good
that
place
is,
to do it.
it's a good place, because I wouldn't want to look at this in isolation of everything else. So I think if you
So
have
what's
the robust
19 minus
list and just
7?
having the ranking,
12.
we would look at it in the 19th
So
and
I
then the
think
meeting after
you may
that.
want to address this on the meeting of the 5th, Carl, and ask
Yeah.
everybody to do
See
their
where we're
homework.
getting. Yeah.
Do their homework by the Friday, which would be the 8th.
Oh, it has to be in the. Yeah. If we
'Cause then
get it
it's-
to by
yeah.
January 12th, will that?
Then it fits into the agenda for the following.
Yes, it does. Now, my question that I had here, given all of this that we just talked about, are we on track for the timeline that we saw 2 weeks ago?
You're ahead
And if not, why not?
so far.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what time I said. I think we had talked about February being the time where we do the nitty-gritty of the budgets and, have numbers by the end of February. I would say we were still on track.
Okay.
And
I mean, we're well ahead of the statutory deadline, so, yeah.
Ah, those
Yeah.
statutory guys, they don't know what they're talking about.
And we will also have, well, I think when we see the first cut of the budget, we're gonna see the actual on the operational side as a column. So that'll come in late January. For the first meeting in February, Pamela will do the cash flow for the year 2. So between that and, I mean, I can pretty much put within a few bucks, ready to take bets on it, what our reserve number is.
I think we already know. It's pretty
We-
damn close, yeah.
We know it's pretty close, so, I mean, which I'll show everybody from last year's budget. It looks like from what I can see,
Just remind you, it's
that we will
295.
be under budget unless there's massive expenditures on personnel costs, which I don't see in the next 13 days.
Sorry, 319 is what we've got to play with. 300 in round numbers.
300 in round numbers.
Anything around more than that is going to be pushing our luck. Plus or minus.
Well,
there's going to be some windfall.
anything less than 2 we're going backwards.
When we chop down some trees, we'll sell them to a tree salvager.
We have a huge advantage over what we had this year. In that, coming into that time, coming into February, March, we'll know where we are.
Right.
We didn't know
Right.
before, and that's been the battle we've had right from the start here.
That's
We
right.
didn't know what we had.
Yeah.
And
And the
now
other-
we've got the first crack and a
Yeah.
chance to start laying out.
I think we've
That's
been
right.
very well armed here.
Yeah.
Helen?
So, this exercise that we're going through as council, would the other departments also do the same? So would we go to Andrew and say, okay, you have a list of,
No, that's not our job.
then how would we know what to approve from his?
Well, no, for January 19th, we'll have you looking at this, and I really like that idea of the columns and ranking what you want. And at January 19th, then we will also have the details of the extra things fire wants, public works wants, general government.
But also
And
in-
you'll get, and capital, and you'll get it all together.
Well, and much
But
like the
also-
presentation we saw last year, then we go through it and say,
Yeah.
if we leave this in, here's the
Yeah,
result.
and then I want you to.
So this will be the council stuff.
Yeah.
I know, but then wouldn't the other department also, because everybody has a big list, right? So what I would like to know is what is, for example, let's just take fire, what is a must-have and what is
Well,
a,
They will have to set it
They'll
up
have
that
to
way.
say what it
Yeah,
is, but
so-
that's the due diligence that the CFO will be doing.
Yeah.
For example, she's
they'll do a
mentioned the
business
burn
case,
building,
yeah.
which
yeah,
is a
because
big
last year
number.
they didn't do that, it was pretty much a big ask.
Yeah.
And then we were supposed
Yeah.
to figure out.
That's my job, to get the
Yeah.
business
Yeah.
cases from them, and I will be pushing back as well. I mean, I'm threatening you with the $300,000 number, as I will staff. I mean, if I get a list from a department of $600,000 of requests,
Well,
that
we'll
would
have to
be
cut
fine
300
to.
from it, total.
Well, I will do some of that cutting before it even comes to
Yeah.
council, but I won't. I will go back to the managers and say, there's 300,000 in total of extra. You need to tell me what your absolute must-have are, do a business case to defend it, but ultimately, it's still council's call. in terms of what they include and what they don't.
Can I just ask one question on the spreadsheet, Ron? Well, I have several, but one main
Yeah.
one. You showed the $53,000 gas tax as an expenditure. Is that simply your this is your way of showing that you want to move it into
It's as
reserves?
much an idea out there. It's either we could put it directly to roads, as in potholes, ditches and stuff like that, or we could use it as a reserve. I
Okay,
mean,
so
as
there's
I said,
two.
you can't use it in both ways. It's got to be one or the other.
Yeah.
And so it's as much an expenditure piece, because I mean, if we're doing it, I mean, I'm arbitrarily doing Nikki's job and saying we're going to put it to.
There's going to be some overlap. I'm sure that
Yeah.
Nikki will also be speaking to the gas tax, but okay, so that's
But I
that's
think
fine.
in terms of optics, if we were to put the 53,000 to reserve, it's an easy. This is where it came from. It was.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we're all paying it every time we pump up, but.
Now, Pam, you would like us to split up between operating costs and capex. I would.
No, we can do that. I mean, if you,
Yeah.
it's easier for you just to look at
Just
it.
to
I mean,
think it
it's,
through, yeah.
because really, I mean, going back, I mean, I totally understand what you're saying about the split between operating and capital, but at the end of the day, this is how much money we have, and this is what we have to spend it. And because it is relatively
In cash
cash
terms,
basis,
yeah.
I'm afraid sometimes when you separate it, you sometimes lose track of how much money you really have. So you don't need to separate it, to answer your question.
Now that $300,000 round number doesn't consider draws on reserves.
Or putting money into a reserve as
Or
well.
putting money into
Yeah,
reserve.
no, both ways. And that's why on that summary page I showed last year to show that in order to just get what we wanted last year, we had to take 180,000 from reserve.
So, I mean, the reason I raise that now is that I think we're going to hear from Nikki that there are going to be a significant amount of capital projects that have to get done next year. And
Maybe, but I would argue that you have to weigh against the fact that we have an outstanding infrastructure master plan. So I know we had
No,
talked about
as
this
a result
being
of them.
no, but being a light capital year until we get the results of the infrastructure master plan.
Well, that's due
and then
mid-January.
that would
and on purpose,
Yeah.
so that will give us a chance to influence the budget.
right. But aside from the capital required from the infrastructure master plan, I would argue that it's actually a light capital year. That I would push back on any other capital projects, unless there was a dire need for them
I hear
because
you,
of
yeah.
what we know is coming with the infrastructure
Yeah.
master plan.
And any capex that we do may be loan funded, and the loan would only fund.
It would be loan funded, but I think with the timeline we have now, we're looking at the spring 2017 borrowing.
That's when the cash would arrive from
Yeah.
a loan that we applied for in September.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
Not to
then
preempt your presentation
No.
next time, but
Yeah.
okay. So that, yeah, I think you're right.
Well, you can see where the reality is coming to the point here.
Yeah,
So-
but there's only one fully emergency program project that we're aware of, and that is a bridge, one of our bridges. However, there's potential opportunity that it's not our bridge, that it belongs to Modi.
Right. And also, given the fact if we need financing to pay for it, it's part of the 2017 budget. We identified that we need it and we put it in our 5-year plan, but we cannot do it until 2017 if we don't have the money.
Now, what about adjustments for things that we did budget for this year and didn't have to? Mostly,
Yeah, so that's the rebudgeting, and one of the things I do have to rebudget. The reason I didn't put them in is because I was trying to keep it high level, and it will have a net zero impact, but a classic one is the Build Canada. We know that we have to rebudget some of the Build Canada, our 1/3, but then of course we will also rebudget some of the revenue, and
well, there's an
although,
extra 60 that we didn't know about.
that's right.
How did we say to do that? We just said draw from reserves. Didn't change the budget.
If it's a 60 I'm thinking of, was my impression that it was going to be a net zero impact, so it's something that Nikki's investigating.
No, I think because the increase in scope, we had to come up with an extra 60.
Well, there's the
beyond-
DFA portion, yes, and then,
Yeah, yeah.
but in terms of the rebudgeting, we will separately be identifying things that need to be rebudgeted, and the Build Canada is one of them. And although the 1/3 will now hit as an expense for the 2016, in the perfect world, and hopefully when I look at the reserves, we won't take the full 179 from reserves that we budgeted. So in a sense, our reserves over the 2 years will have the same.
As long
net
as
zero
we're not
impact.
borrowing from underspent line items to make overspent line items look good, we need to be very, very honest on our budget line items. So, for example, we budgeted $10,000 in infrastructure planning grant. It's in there. We didn't get it for whatever reason.
Yeah.
We need to show a $10,000 loss in that line item. $10,000.
It won't be a loss, but it'll be against budget, exactly. No,
Variance from budget. Yeah.
I'm a very big
Variance.
believer in that even when identify a shortfall and say, okay, we'll underspend in this area to compensate.
That's cash, yeah.
Well, no, but in presentation, you still show that you went over budget in that one line, and
Absolutely.
you show that you went under budget in this other, and then you explain that that's what you use the
I'm
money for.
adamant we do
but
that because
it's-
that'll give us some discipline in the budgeting process. Where I'm going with this is I very much do not want to be budgeting projects that have no likelihood of going off in the year, because it's hampering us on other projects.
Right. And to me, that's exactly the point with the infrastructure master
Yeah.
plan. We can identify
that's
all
a
the
good
projects
point.
in the world, but we don't budget them until 2017.
Yeah.
If that's not, if that's
Well, let's
when
put
we
them
don't
in the
get money.
5-year plan as well.
Well, of course, that's exactly
So-
that's exactly what you do in your 5-year plan. And our 5-year plan will have much more weight now because we can slot in things from the infrastructure.
actually real.
Last year,
I
we
recommend the two of you
didn't.
go for coffee and we
Okay.
move on.
Okay.
This is where it starts getting interesting. Come on.
Yes.
So, sorry, what do we need to do? What's
Okay,
our
I will send a template around and everybody will fill it in.
So
That's
And you will have the opportunity to add your wishes at the bottom.
Yeah.
It's not a big,
It's not a big deal.
deal.
No, no, no.
It's not a big deal.
I think most of us
Then we
already
have
have.
nothing.
Yeah.
It-
Right.
No, but.
Can you send me this in soft,
No,
please?
but you go through that line by line, you come up pretty quickly with that.
Just make sure the number at the bottom of your column is quite low.
Yeah, and actually, Jimmy, they learned a lot of JHs on that, so.
I know.
Materially, but I mean.
Can I have yours?
So quite, it doesn't work, it doesn't go 20% each.
and I give a gold star to whoever has the lowest value in a
Well,
column.
that's
No, don't. I mean, everybody's going to be opining on other people's requests.
Right.
Line zero.
There may be a few gaps. Not in my section. Okay,
Okay.
Moving to
where are we?
We would be on F.
Actually, can I discuss mine at the next meeting, because it's budget items?
Sure.
So,
Is that what it is?
pretty much, to get some,
we should
yes.
amalgamate it with the other stuff then.
Yeah,
When you say the next meeting, oh, you mean in January?
Yeah.
Not
Well, to
tonight.
The next meeting.
Carl's got the torch now,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. Okay, fine. So that was F, Helen? Okay, good. So we'll.
G was Trailblazers, which was, it's the same spirit as the, which is on the own table item. The same spirit as the play school. I would suggest it's a community event, that the Trailblazers are expecting to host 120 odd people to commemorate the trail and the event. And so they're asking for 5 folding chairs, which they will pick up and return. So I'm putting forward that they put forward the $50 fee and $50 deposit, and that it's refunded when they return the
Folding
stuff.
chairs, folding tables.
Folding tables. They don't want people to sit down.
Quite frankly, I would rather we pass the hat than have the village absorb the cost. It's not an official event.
but it's not really a cost either.
True.
Well, it is, we're waiving of rental income. I mean, it's
We're using an
$50.
income, but it's not a cost.
Yeah, is it lost income? Yeah, maybe not.
It's part of the advantage of having a village with some resources that you can do stuff like that. It's just a resource that we have that we could use. And
Just lend it out. They're going to do all the work.
They're
They're
gonna do
doing
all,
they're providing all the food.
so I don't think there's any reason to even stand up on it. We might as well just say, do it.
That's the Lions Bay way.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think we only need the deposit. I mean, I wouldn't have them advance us the revenue. I would just say, we would have the deposit and
Well,
we'll
let's
just
make it a
return
retrospective deposit. If they happen to break the tables, they're going to have to buy a new one. I have 2. I mean, for heaven's sake, of my
I
own.
mean, the Trailblazers, come on. I mean, these guys have done a lot.
Oh, no, I agree. What I'm saying, I think someone had mentioned they would give us a check for the revenue and we return it. I would say we wouldn't even get a check for the revenue
Okay,
to return.
I think
So-
we're pretty clear there. Once
so
again, it's a
just-
slight precedent.
And so on
It
the,
is.
on the resolution, Pam, you're suggesting that we waive the fee and hold the deposit?
What was the actual request?
Well, it would be the same, I
Yeah.
was thinking conventionally, and
I mean, normally we just get a
they
check for
take
the
their 50.
deposit and we
You
return
get
the
the 50 and the
check.
50. The fee was 50.
Well, we wouldn't get the fee, so I'm just saying that we would get a check for the $50 for the deposit, which we would return. We wouldn't even cash, we return it when the tables are returned.
I'll give you the $50 and get it back.
Okay. So then the resolution is just we waive
Unless they break the
fees.
tables. Then what? Do I lose my deposit?
And then
why
you
don't-
replace it with your 2 tables.
Oh, forget it. Mine are nicer.
Okay, come on, let's focus here, come on.
Do we do that?
So,
Do we do that when they have the function at Wade Park?
Oh, we should.
I
That's my point. The
Yeah.
point is that if we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it across everything, not just,
I know, that's the thing. Are we
Yeah.
prepared to lend the tables out to whoever asks for nothing?
Yeah.
By
And
the
we
way,
do
I
have
need
a
to borrow
process-
25 folding chairs for Christmas, please. Can I get it for free? Half the village is coming.
So, Pam, the resolution is,
we're putting you on the spot.
I think it's just to waive the rental fee.
waive the rental fee. Thank you.
Yeah, that's
I'll
fine.
put that forward tonight.
Good, thanks. Moving on to H, Central Beach Washroom.
Thank you, that's mine. And really, this complements Carl's email out to the, to the
Proponents.
resident proponent group who came forward, have gone away, and he's revisited with them. Thank you, Carl. And I think there was two pieces. I had approached a resident to consider scope and design, which they tentatively said yes to, but they knew that Dave Butler had done an assessment to the building, and I think Nikki had also done a secondary piece regarding the paint on the side. So if I can ask staff to send me those two pieces of information, then I will give it to the potential scope and design person and give it to Carl as well. Actually, let's give it to Carl too, so that the resident proponent group can have the same information.
I had a question about this. Are they offering these services for free?
So here's, now Nikki's, I don't want to preempt what Nikki has to say. She told me that she had good news for me over the beach washroom. I don't know what that is. It may be something to do with the
Right, I
new
think
US.
she said this is good news, I think is
Yeah.
what she meant. Then we
Yeah.
just need to, because neither one of us had any details of this.
Yeah.
So I think what she meant is, it sounds good, but we don't know the details. So
Oh, I
are
see,
they-
I see.
That's what she meant.
Okay, no, well, this has been going around, right? So yes is the short answer to your question. The slightly longer answer is, they would assist staff, so the staff doesn't, it's not like staff doesn't have enough to do, to put out a bid, a tender, for beach washroom renovation. They would bid on it at a very low cost. The cost may be as low as $1.
Okay.
But it's competitive bid.
Mhm.
Why? Because they will fund it by
Mhm.
their own donation.
Okay.
They will do it to appropriate standards, et cetera, and that's how it was good. That
Okay.
was how it was going to
Okay.
work.
So the brief discussion I had with Nikki was we need to look at whether or not it's even necessary to do a bid if they are basically offering it for free. So that was the caution. I know some emails had come out, but maybe no more emails on
Well, I
having
think
to
this
do a
came from
quote
Nikki.
until.
Well, I don't exactly
Yeah.
remember how it came out that we had to bid it, but if that's not the case,
Yeah, so we'll look into
fantastic.
that. We'll look into that.
But
from
either
our end.
way, staff has to be fully satisfied as to the design and finish
Yes.
and code adherence and all that stuff.
Yes, yes. And then a further accounting piece, just to close the loop, is once it is built, we assess the value, and then we actually have to put it into our TCI as a
Yeah.
donated asset
Yeah.
at the fair market value.
Okay. Well, that's
Which isn't a
fine.
problem, but
We
it's
don't pay
just,
tax.
it's, there's always accounting implications, even of free things.
I know.
Okay,
Okay. I email fixes.
which was
Ron.
Councillor.
Okay, I'll ask you why, because I was not going to ask this. Where are our nice new telephones that we bought 3 months ago?
They're here and they're installed. There's issues we think that are with TELUS, just nightmares with TELUS, so
To install the internet,
final piece.
basically.
The internet, what?
The internet for us to run the phones off of.
So we have two phones on our
And they've
desk.
missed their appointment once, and
That's why phone system wasn't working.
So we have two phone systems now, and sometimes this phone rings and sometimes that phone rings and no one can get through. So we're doing our best to get TELUS in, but we're very close. We have them, they're installed.
Why are
The
we having to
supplier-
do it? Why is the vendor not making it work?
Oh,
They
the
are,
vendor
we're not
is.
doing
It's,
anything, we're just sitting.
The vendor is.
oh, the vendor is. It's just trying to get TELUS to come
It's
in,
TELUS.
waiting weeks for appointments, and then them not showing up, and it's been
Okay.
a bit of a nightmare.
Sounds like a nightmare.
We're almost there, but we literally have two phones on all of our desks now.
Email fixes. Ron?
Just, I would identify to the council members that I observed an email exchange that was between Carl and a third party, and council was copied in on it. And when Carl was subsequently emailing to the third party, council's email chain was on that. And I don't believe that was the intent.
Which one was this now?
And not to say that there is anything horribly wrong about this, but there was an opportunity that perhaps it could have been. And I guess for me, I would caution council in the use of the email piece, that until I suggest that I work with Sean on this to get to the bottom of this, that maybe you change the subject line or something like that so that it doesn't pick it up. Or I'm not sure what it is artificial intelligence or what's going on here.
It's your client, and I don't know how this particular one happened, but you have an opportunity in your client, which in most cases is Outlook, to say include the thread or not. So if you have that set, which most people do, it's the default.
Okay.
It'll include the email that you're replying to or forwarding, etc., etc.
Okay. Well, then there's the heads up for all of us on this one.
Yeah, we need to. We meaning I particularly, because I do a lot of it.
It
Need
just
to
happens to be
exercise
you in this
caution,
case,
discipline.
but it would slip out somewhere here. And
Well, that raises an interesting point, because if that's true, then the default setting should be off.
Yeah.
And if we want it on, we turn it on, but it comes off.
Copied in
It turns
specifically.
itself off.
yeah, and so
Yeah.
you copy someone
So
specifically.
that's right.
So I mean,
Then you
it's
do
a
that
self-taught.
when you got it. Yeah.
It's a
That
self-taught
makes
thing,
sense,
and
yeah.
I won't name a situation, but when we moved from the old platform, which was horrible, and let's just leave it at that, to this new one, I did send one that was a little hotter email, shall we say, and I made sure I stitched and pasted and took it out, and then it pressed send, and lo and behold, there it was. So unhappy me.
Now, are you, when you use the email, do you use the web interface that they provide,
Yeah.
the Outlook web user or something?
The web thingy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can also do it. You can, when I do my email, it comes into my Outlook client on my desktop. You just set up a new account. And I actually, funny enough, started drafting an email to everybody about a week ago, then I dropped it. That I'd encourage you to do that because you have far better control. It does mean you don't need.
This means I have to pack my phone around with me.
No, that's the point. You don't have to be
Okay.
online.
I'm
You
just-
can work offline.
Okay, so we should be aware.
Just be disciplined. Yeah. Okay. Good heads up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I have to leave for 5 minutes, but I will be back.
Do you want us to wait?
Nope.
We're going into closed now.
By the time we get to it, I'll be back.
Okay, fine. Okay, so we'll move on to resolution to close the meeting. Now, we don't take resolutions in strategy meetings.
I think we need to close the meeting then. That would be the exception, the resolution to close the meeting.
Can we, really, we can take a vote in this meeting? Oh, no, we can, because we have to
Yes.
approve the agenda and everything.
Yes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Okay, so can I have a motion to close the meeting under 91E? Thank you in a second. All in favour, opposed, carried. So we will now move to the close. For reporting out of the closed session, Council will bring forth a resolution in the open session of the business meeting this evening relating to an offer for purchase of village land.